Thank you for attending our workshop today. My name is Annie Randolph, and I am the Outreach and Resource Network Manager here with the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. We are very excited to share some information today pertaining to the latest and greatest with assistive technology, vocational rehabilitation services, navigating resources in Southeast Iowa, as well as information around ambiguous loss. We will be recording this workshop today and will provide the recording to all of the attendees who registered by about this time next week. For many years, the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has convened families and individuals impacted by brain injury to various workshops held across the state. Our family and caregiver workshops attract a wide variety of individuals and families at different points in their journey after brain injury. If you've attended our workshops in the past, you'll know that they are typically hosted in person and convene at local resources from the area we host the event in. This year is a little different, as you can see. However, we are still committed to bringing you information pertaining to local resources and beyond. We hope you can use this workshop as a time for yourself and to ask questions if needed. For more than 40 years, the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has embraced a mission to create a better future through brain injury prevention, advocacy, education, research, and support. Starting as an all-volunteer organization in the 1980s, we have worked continuously for decades as an information hub for Iowans with brain injury and their families, as well as an advocacy hub for statewide legislative and policy change. Now staffed by a growing team of professionals, the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa develops and deploys and continuously improves an array of evidence-based and nationally best practice services to support Iowans with brain injury in recovery, rehabilitation, and adjusting to life after their injuries. Our neuro resource facilitation staff guide thousands of individuals and families as they learn how to live well with brain injury, helping them to access and keep a range of services and supports and to reduce the level of disability resulting from brain injury. Our services also enable many Iowans with brain injury based emotional and behavioral challenges to avoid incarceration, inappropriate psychiatric inpatient commitment, and expensive out-of-state and long-term institutionalization. The Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has become increasingly effective in working with state agencies and policymakers to develop legislation and policies that impact our constituency, as well as many other Iowans with chronic health conditions and disabilities. We provide professional, family, and caregiver education to disseminate up-to-date information about emerging evidence-based and best practices in brain injury care and treatment while working to raise awareness about and prevent brain injury. With the death rate from brain injury progressively decreasing over the past 20 years, we now have more than 90,000 Iowans living with long-term disability from acquired brain injury in Iowa. As for some housekeeping notes pertaining to the workshop, you will notice, like I mentioned before, that on this Zoom platform, you have a toolbar that shows a chat box. So if you click this chat box, you will be able to type in any questions or comments you might have throughout the entire workshop. So please feel free to add those in as you're thinking of them or as they come to mind, and we will answer those in the order that they were received at the end of each session. Oh, let's see. I will be monitoring this chat box the whole time, so please feel free to ask a question or provide a comment. This is also where I will provide a survey link at the end of each presentation, so you can provide your thoughts and your feedback about each presenter. And then, let's see here. And then, as hopefully all of you saw the email that came in about an hour or two ago from us with all the biographies for all the speakers. So please go ahead and check those out so that you can get to know each of the speakers a little bit better. But now I just want to walk through a couple of resources on our website that are for individuals and caregivers. So I'm going to take a second to share my screen here. All right. So if you go to our website, here is the front of it. If you hover over the services tab here, you will see a support group listing or a support group option here Go ahead and click that if you're interested in some of our support groups. These are just some of the things that we have going on right now that I wanted to share with you guys. It'll bring you to a map of where all the in-person support groups are, which currently aren't meeting right now because of COVID, but we do have some online groups that I wanted to share with you. So once you get to this page, you can see the information for our statewide online support group, which meets every Thursday from 3 to 4:30. I would encourage anyone who is looking for a way to connect with other individuals impacted by brain injury to check out one of these support groups. We've had a lot of great attendance and a lot of great feedback with these support groups that we started many months ago once the pandemic hit, and people are really finding it to be very helpful. So this is where you would go to attend one of the groups. You would just scroll down and click on the day that you want to attend. Click register here, and it'll take you to a separate site, a Zoom site where you would register, and then you would be able to join the meeting at that time. Additionally, we have our caregiver support group. So this meets the first Thursday of every month from 3 to 4:30. So same with the other support group. You can just click the day that you want to attend, and then you'll be able to join the meeting that way. And pardon me, I'm going to scroll down about half the page here to get to our Facebook group. So I'm sorry if this is making anybody a little dizzy. But I do want to tell you about some new Facebook support groups that we have. We have had a brain injury affected, or a BIA persons affected by brain injury community for many years now. So if you're interested in that, that is for anybody in Iowa impacted by brain injury. And then also we have a Connecting Together Facebook support group for parents of children with brain injury. And then we also have these two new groups for caregivers. We have a private and a public group. So if you're interested in checking those out, I would encourage you to do so. There's been a lot of great feedback with those groups, and we've had a lot of great conversation and support going around with all the folks that are in those groups. So I would encourage anybody who is looking for more connection or some more support for navigating life after a brain injury, check out those groups as well. So just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about what we have going on here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let our first presenter, Allison Andrews, get started.
My name is Allison Andrews, and I am a neuro resource facilitator here at the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. And I cover some of our southeast counties that we have in Iowa. And before coming here, I worked for one of our community neurobehavioral rehabilitation service providers for about 1.5 years, working in person with individuals before joining this team here. And so one of my areas that I'm very passionate about is assistive technology, because I know how important independence is to each and every one of us. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. And so some of the goals of this presentation is for me to define assistive technology and distinguish between some of the low-tech options versus the high-tech options, and exploring some of those ways to obtain assistive technology. And then specifically taking a look at what assistive technology looks like for life after a brain injury. And so defining assistive technology, this is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities. And so this, again, can be low tech or high tech. And I think the key points here is that the goal is really to increase or improve the quality of life. And then another important aspect is that it's meant to be individualized. So one tool or device is not going to be appropriate for every individual. And so we have our low-tech assistive technology. So this is going to be any device or piece of equipment that won't require much training, It's going to be less expensive, and it won't have any complex or mechanical features. So some examples will include pen and paper, a cane or a walker, large print text, a reacher or grabber, graphic organizer, or a visual schedule. Whereas on the other hand, we have our high-tech assistive technology, and these are going to be your more complex devices or equipment that have digital or electronic components. They may be computerized. They will likely require some effort and training to learn how to use, and they tend to be a bit more costly. And so I think when we think of assistive technology, we're thinking about these higher tech items. And some of those examples can include our phone or computer, an electric wheelchair, recognition or magnification software, text to speech, electronic aids, or digital hearing aids. So how do you choose the right assistive technology? So oftentimes selecting assistive technology can be done without a consultation. And examples of this would be labeling the cabinets or drawers in the kitchen to include their contents, or selecting a mindfulness app on your phone. Whereas other times, a consultation with a professional may be necessary. So that's when you'll be turning to a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, speech therapist, recreational therapist, or even a physician. And so they would likely be helping you with those, choosing a proper device for mobility. So whether it's a cane or a walker or a wheelchair, a communication device, so some of those more high-tech devices. But I think all in all, regardless of consultation or not, there is a trial and error process. So you're going to want to test different items or devices to find what works best for the individual. And then kind of ask yourself, is there any way that this can be improved to better fit my needs? Or looking at if the item, the tool, device, whatever it is, needs to be tweaked over time. And then you'll want to sample to find the best fit. So again, one item isn't going to be appropriate for all people. So who pays for assistive technology? We see that Medicare and Medicaid are options. And thinking about our brain injury waiver that we have here in Iowa, it currently does not include assistive technology. That is something that we'd like to take a look at. There are other states that do have that included in their brain injury waiver. So hopefully at some point in the future, we can work on that. Private insurance, they'll cover it if it's deemed necessary and prescribed by a physician. And then there are some grants and loans that are available for individuals to access. And then I did want to highlight the opportunity for accessing a lending library. And I think the big one here in Iowa that we think of is Easter seals, but I know some churches or hospitals have some loan closets as well, where you can go to try out a device or equipment or multiple devices or equipment before committing to purchasing one. And so now I wanted to focus in a little bit more on what role assistive technology plays for an individual who has had a brain injury. And so I wanted to take a look at our 2020 needs assessment that we put out this year. We asked a few questions related to assistive technology. And so one of them was, do you feel your life would be made easier by assistive technology? And 70% of those respondents said yes, while 30% said no. And when asked why not easier, people stated that there's a feeling that technology can be too difficult for a survivor. So it's not something they think would be successfully used. There can be a general resistance or inability to learn new technology, or it feels like a losing battle. We also asked about different devices. So do you have a smartphone? We saw 85% said yes, 15% no, While looking at computer access, we had 96% say yes, while 4% said no. And so after a brain injury, we know that it comes with many different symptoms that can make day-to-day life a little bit frustrating for these individuals. And um, it can be hard to navigate daily routines feeling this way. And so I think the rest of this presentation, I wanted to take a closer look at some specific areas where people often feel they struggle after a brain injury, and look at both low tech and high tech options, because the goal here is to have you leave here today feeling not so overwhelmed by assistive technology, because if you find something that works, it can really make a difference in how much more independent someone can feel. So first we'll start with memory. So some low tech options here. I know I mentioned labels on drawers and cabinets, specifically in the kitchen, and it's not something we think about. So if you think about unloading the dishwasher, it can be overwhelming to someone if they don't remember where the silverware goes or where the pots and pans belong. Um, Whereas in the bedroom or the bathroom, getting dressed can be a tedious task if you're unsure where to find the proper attire for the weather. And so just making some quick labels and putting those on can be something that's really helpful. Some signs indicating where different areas of the house are located. So I know a big one is the bathroom. So whether it's a visual image of a toilet or a shower, or the word bathroom on the bathroom door, that's going to signal to that individual, okay, there's the bathroom. Or the other example I can think of is a stop sign or the word stop on the front door. If you have somebody who frequently walks out, but they don't have any place in mind where they're going to. So to kind of help prevent the wandering behaviors that we sometimes see. A memory scrapbook. I know I've used both a word-based and a picture-based scrapbook with individuals. And so for example, for someone who can't recall any factual information about themselves before their injury. So it would be walking them through, my name is Allison Andrews, and I was born in Round Lake Heights, Illinois, and I have two sisters. So just any factual information that is oftentimes forgotten. But then throwing in some pictures that maybe include the names, location, dates, anything that will jog any of those memories that you can refer to when needed. A journal, and this will look different from person to person. Some people like to take a notebook with them wherever they go throughout the day so that they can write down specific details or information that they learned. Whereas other people use a journal to maybe write down when they took their medications, if they took them all, what they ate. It depends. Planned and consumed menus. I've used both of these in my previous work setting, and I think the planned menus were helpful for individuals to kind of think about a plan ahead of time of how to best utilize the ingredients they had on hand, so that when it comes down to the point of I'm hungry, it's already known what they wanted to make that day. Whereas a consumed menu, I know I've seen individuals who may not necessarily remember that they had already consumed lunch. And so this was a helpful tool to have where after a meal, they could record what they ate, but also what time they ate, so that later they could refer to this to signal, oh, I've already eaten, or wow, it's already 2 p.m. and I haven't had lunch today. A calendar, whether it's a weekly or a monthly calendar. I know color coding is another strategy that can be very helpful. So maybe you're highlighting appointments in blue and fun recreational activities in orange. Anything that kind of distinguishes between different events. There's call logs. So this is helpful to jog memory. So maybe I have an appointment with my therapist. So I'll write my therapist's name down and her phone number and what I plan to discuss with her for that session. Or on the other hand, it could be helpful for those who maybe forget they already made a call. So maybe I talked to mom 20 minutes ago, but I want to go call her again because I don't remember I already did that. So having a log where you can write down calls that you have already placed. And then there are task cards. So I know an example I have used with an individual is a meal preparation set of task cards. So really breaking it down. So every card had a different step in completing that task. So the first card would say, well, grab your meal preparation task cards. And the next one would say, check your planned menu. And the next one would say, wash your hands. So really breaking it down for the individual so that the task doesn't seem too overwhelming, but then also they can make sure that they're sequencing through it in the appropriate manner. And then a checklist. So I found these to be helpful for daily routines, or maybe a cleaning checklist of I need to grab these materials before I can clean the bathroom. And when I get in the bathroom, I may be too overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Or maybe I've already cleaned the counter, but I'm doing it again. And so it's helpful to break the task down, be able to check it off. And these things can always be laminated so that they can be reused time after time. So then looking at some higher tech options, most of our smart devices, whether it's a phone or a computer, already come built with some of these helpful tools. So a calendar on your smart device, again, that can be color coded and updated on the go if this is a device that a person prefers. Alarm reminders are very helpful. I found especially for medication reminders or even appointment reminders. Notes, so there's a notes app built in where you can just jot down any information in there and refer to it at a later time. And then also there's a to-dos app that's built in. And then an app that you can find in the App Store. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just some examples that I've tested that would be helpful in this area. So there's Notebook, and this is available for Apple and Android for free. So even though, again, it's higher tech, it doesn't come with that high price tag, which is what I was hoping to do today as well. So in this app, you can organize different notes, and they can be text, audio, images, checklists, into different notebooks. So I could have a separate notebook for maybe my therapy appointments to recall what I talked to my therapist about last week, or a separate notebook for physical therapy where I could insert images of exercises my therapist gave me to work on until our next appointment. So these can all be stored in one place, and they can be searched based on whatever, it'll pick up any keyword in your note that you are trying to locate. So another area I wanted to tune in on was executive functioning. And so these are going to be regarding your planning and prioritizing processes, organization, task initiation, impulse control, emotional control, memory, and self-monitoring. And so some low-tech options here would be a daily schedule, and this could be written or it can be visual, but something that an individual can create to kind of plan out how they are going to spend their day. And it can be as structured as the individual prefers. So I know in my experience, I had someone who benefited by scheduling the day minute by minute. That's just how she operated, and it was very helpful for her, whereas another individual struggled with how he planned to spend his free time. And so his looked a little bit different. We had a specific area where he would plan out some activities of how he could spend that free time without necessarily penciling them in for 3 o'clock. And then you can, on the other hand, have a visual schedule where you just insert some different images of how you plan to spend your day. Again, there are task cards that can just help with sequencing and task completion, and also that task initiation of where do I even begin here. Checklist and list. We also discuss that for memory, and they can be used for a number of things. And another example I've created with an individual was one for work. And um, before work, she would often become upset and wasn't in emotional control to begin her work shift, and that was a big barrier in the community. So we had a checklist for before she would even start work, and then a separate checklist for her to use to complete her work duties as well. Budgeting, there are some budgeting trackers that again can be individualized. So you can, if you really struggle with that impulse control, this individual could use a daily budget tracker where you're kind of checking in with yourself and saying, well, this is how much money I'm starting with this morning, and this is how much I'm ending with tonight, and how much do I have left for the remainder of the week. A weekly budget is helpful if you look at your specific plans and think about, well, I know on Tuesday I'm going to get coffee with a friend, so I'm going to set aside $5 for that. And then a monthly budget to kind of help prioritize paying off those bills before seeing how much money you have for any fun activities. And then there's the envelope system, which goes hand in hand with the weekly and monthly budgets, I would say, where for that coffee example, if I know that I'm going out for coffee with a friend and I plan to spend $5, I'm going to put $5 in an envelope to help hold myself accountable and label it coffee. And then when I go out for coffee, I'm only going to take that one envelope with me so that I don't overspend. And that has been very helpful for some of the individuals I've worked with. Pros and cons list for decision making, again, with impulse control, deficits, and really just planning out if I go ahead with this decision, how is it going to impact me and how is it going to impact others around me? So thinking through what are the pros of this decision and what are the cons and which one outweighs the other. And step-by-step recipes. So this is something probably a lot of us use that we don't think about. So they can be written, or there are visual recipes, which are helpful for some individuals. So you can have images of the ingredients, but then also images of the steps that are completed for that recipe. So some higher tech options, again, for these step-by-step tasks. An example I have for this one would be a video of the individual completing a task. So I had someone who had to check their blood glucose every day, but she received a new device to do so and wasn't sure how to use that device. And it was very overwhelming for her that she just didn't want to do it, but it was important. And so we read the instructions, and she really benefited from having visual instructions. So we used her iPad to make a video of her walking through the steps, so that each time she went to go check her blood sugar level, she would watch this video. And eventually over time, she had watched the video and completed those steps so many times that she could eventually do it independently without that video. And she was really proud of herself for that. So using the devices that we have to kind of create those videos of any step-by-step task that we would encounter in our day-to-day life. And then looking at some apps, there's iHour. So this is a habit and skill tracker. It's available both Apple and Android for free. And this one really assists with planning and tracking how you spend your time. And it's a very much so a visual schedule. Todoist, this one is only available for Apple and it's free. This one I use this one daily. It allows you to capture and organize your tasks, but you can also break down those tasks to have different checkpoints throughout, and then also prioritize them based on due dates or importance, whatever it may be. And then there's Any List. This is a grocery shopping list available for Apple and Android for free. And this one you can create organized grocery lists and store your recipes. So if I have a specific recipe in mind that I want to make, it'll pull up the ingredients that are needed for that recipe, but then you can also go through and see what you already have on hand and kind of store those other ingredients that are needed onto that grocery list. So it's really handy. Next is medical, and this one is a big one that I hear people talk about often. It's a very frustrating area, especially in life for life after brain injury. And so some low tech options to be considered would be a portable health record. And so this is something that you can take with you to every appointment. And it can include an updated list of your medications, contact information for all of the different medical providers that you see. It can hold emergency contact information. And I think a big one is information specific to brain injury, because not every brain injury is the same. And I know I hear often that some medical providers don't quite understand brain injury. So I think it can be helpful to include a snapshot of, I have a brain injury and this is how it specifically impacts my life. And these are areas of concern for me, so that they know how to best work with you and pass along information as well. A pill box. So I know these are pretty common. I've seen daily ones, I've seen weekly ones, I've seen monthly ones, but just anywhere that you can divide out your medications, keep them organized, and remember when to take those as well. Flashcards for your medications. I know I've seen that if people don't understand why they're taking a medication, sometimes they may be resistant to take that medication. Again, that comes with that decision-making process. Um, or they just may not remember when they take certain medications, so they may try to go back and take it again. So I know I've worked with people to record the name of the medication, what time it is taken, the purpose of medication, and the side effects of medication, so that they're also aware of that. And these can also be laminated, and sometimes they benefit from checking them off as they take them throughout the day, so that it's just another level of reassurance. A journal. I've had people use a journal to write down any symptoms or tracking their mood to share later with their medical provider, or a guide for, did I take my medications today? What time did I take them? Did I take them all? Maybe I took a PRN medication for my headache. So just anywhere to jot down that information. And then trackers. These are also helpful low tech tools where you can record this information and share it later with a provider, but also it allows you to see any trends that are going on with pain, seizures, migraines, sleep, and mood. I know I've used a sleep tracker with a few individuals, and it took a look at what time did I go to bed, what time did I wake up, did I nap throughout the day, how am I feeling today, did I exercise, did I have any caffeine? And so it really helped them take a look at how their habits impacted their quality of sleep, rather than just thinking about the time of how long they slept that night. So some higher tech options. Again, alarm reminders are very helpful when it comes to reminding yourself to take your medications. And then there are some great apps out there. So Mango Health is one that's available on Apple and Android. for free. So this one you can schedule pill reminders, and also some healthy habit reminders, which I thought was neat. So some of them were water and food intake, blood glucose, blood pressure. You could record your mood. These were all things that you would insert yourself. But again, it's just a good way to remind yourself to think about some of those healthy habits that kind of get lost throughout the day. Symptify, again, available Apple and Android for free. This one guides you through an evaluation of the body to help identify symptoms to share with a medical professional. So it's not going to provide medical advice, but it'll walk through with the individual um, different areas of the body, different symptoms that they could be experiencing, the severity, so that it will provide them with a snapshot that they can later take to their medical professional to best communicate how they're feeling. Care Zone, again, available for Apple and Android for free. So this one you will receive reminders to take your medications, a reminder for refilling your prescriptions, which is also important, and tracking adherence. So this one will prompt you to enter in, hey, yes, I took this medication today. And if you don't, it'll check in with you. You can also insert your vitals, track your symptoms, organize provider information so that it's kind of a central hub in that app to organize all of that information that you can then later share with family members or providers. And then EPSI, this one is also available for Apple and Android for free. This one, you can set reminders for medications and track compliance. And this one is a seizure application. So you can track your seizures and it'll walk you through the duration of the seizure, what type of seizure you were having, what symptoms you experienced, any possible triggers. If you had to take an emergency medication, it will ask you which one, so that again you can go back and look at these trends over time or share with your provider what your seizures have been looking like. And then mental and physical well-being. So some low-tech options that we have here. The Safety and Wellness Plan. This is a document that we have here at the Brain Injury Alliance. So if anybody is interested, we would be more than happy to send that out. This is a document that takes a look at triggers, early warning signs, and when things are getting worse. But then it also provides some space to think about an action plan for each of those. And then it looks at daily maintenance plans, and it provides some space to list out some wellness tools that an individual may have. I think my favorite part is looking at how others can help or not help. I mean, if we're talking about some aggressive behaviors, obviously we want to know what is going to be harmful in that situation for that individual. But also providing some space to list out any medications or conditions and some emergency contact information. So a very helpful tool to have on hand. And personal intervention plans, I used these at my previous workplace, and they're kind of similar to the safety and wellness plan. So it is looking at a specific behavior that an individual sees as problematic or troubling. And it walks you through a few questions. So an example could be anger. So you'll want to look at, well, what triggers anger for this individual? And so maybe it's when my feet hurt. And what does that angry behavior look like specifically for this person? Because it can look different from person to person. And so for this individual, that he may pace back and forth, he may mumble under his breath or start swearing. And then it will address, well, what can I as the individual do if I feel that I am getting angry? And so then you can list out some specific items. So for this individual, it was maybe first starting with soaking my feet in Epsom salt to see if it relieves some of that pain. And then maybe the next step, if that doesn't work, would be asking for a pain medication. Um, it also is going to look at what others can do to support during that time. So if I know a walk is helpful when an individual is becoming angry, I might invite them to go on a walk with me. So I'm not calling out that angry behavior, but I'm inviting them um, to join me on something that I know is often enjoyable to take away some of that stimulation. And then it also is going to ask about what tools and resources that individual specifically has to address that behavior. And so this was a very helpful tool, not only for the staff, but also for the individual with the brain injury, family members, caregivers, but also providers if they apply in that setting. Um, Self-love journal prompts. These are very powerful. It's easy to slip into negative thinking. So trying to reframe some of that. So some examples of those prompts would be, what is the most loving thing I've ever done for myself? What makes me smile? Or what is one choice I can make right now that my future self will thank me for? And so these are prompts that the individual may choose to kind of think about on their own, or they may want to share with another person. We do have copies of that as well here, so please feel free to reach out if you are interested. Similar to the journal prompts, there's journal, but this can be just more broad of what they choose to write about. It may be a summary of their day. It may be a summary of how they felt throughout the day. They may check in multiple times throughout the day to track their mood. And then trackers. So similar to the medical trackers, there are trackers for stress, anxiety, depression, sleep, and mood. And some high-tech options. So some apps, for example, would be Headspace. So this is available on Apple and Android. It's free, or there's a premium subscription. So this app teaches mindfulness. There are some breathing exercises, and it's really basic. So it is geared towards beginners, and it has guided audio, which is very helpful. Dailyo Journal, again available on Apple and Android, free or premium. This is a journal tracking for mood. You can check in multiple times per day. It'll use little emojis to help the person identify how they're feeling, whether they're angry, sad, or happy. And then it gives you the option to add in some notes to further add detail on how you're feeling. Mindfulness Coach, again available on Apple and Android for free. So this one will walk you through how to relax, take charge of your anxiety, and think positively with some different activities and guided meditations. And Sandvelo for stress and anxiety, available on Apple and Android for free or premium. This one provides some strategies and resources for coping with stress, anxiety, and depression. So there are some informational readings and activities as well. So that kind of wraps up my presentation. I have my references here, but I did want to open it up for questions or comments, and I do love to hear from people on maybe some tools and devices they're using, or after this presentation, any tools and devices that they think would be useful in their life.
Thank you, Allison. We have a comment here from Courtney saying this is all wonderful and thank you for the great ideas and resources. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. I guess I would ask Allison, what is one way that you have helped someone with assistive technology in your NERF role here at the Brain Injury Alliance?
Yeah, I have someone currently who came to me and was really frustrated with budgeting. It was really hard. She disclosed that she is very impulsive with how she spends her money, and it's created a big stressor for her, and it's come to the point where it's concerning of whether or not she can afford her rent. And so I know I mentioned the budgeting trackers and the envelope system. So that's something that we looked at together, that we actually customized. We got on a Zoom call. I shared my screen with kind of an outline that I already had in place and listened to her about her specific needs. And then we kind of tweaked it together so that it fit for her personally. And then I went ahead and mailed her some copies of those to use. And since then, we've gotten on a few more Zoom calls to kind of check in with one another about where things are at, answer any of her questions, and just see if it, again, because it's constantly checking in, is this still working now that you're using it? How can we make any more changes so that it works best for you?
That's awesome. Yeah, if anybody is on the workshop today and has questions for the resource facilitator that covers their area of Iowa, you can always give us a call, and we'd be happy to, just like Allison said, kind of work with the individual and figure out what might work for them, and continuously check in to see how things are going as a part of our nurse services. Oh, we do have a question here from Valerie. What would you suggest, Allison, for an individual who accumulates too many things? Do you have any sort of like low tech or high tech options for someone who has issues with that, maybe?
Yeah, I know in my previous workplace, this was an issue for an individual as well. And um, we did have, we used a cleaning checklist that was helpful. I know clutter became an issue, and it was actually a barrier to living independently in the community. So um, that was a way to help clean up the clutter. As far as accumulating too many things, there, I know with that individual, we would often check in with her, and it's kind of tedious, but going through whatever the items may be that is easily accumulated, and helping them think about that decision making process of, is this a necessary item? Does it bring joy to your life? If you part with it, what will be the worst that will happen? So kind of helping them walk through that.
That's a great
Hopefully
suggestion.
that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I've had folks in my NERF role who have had that issue as well, or questions around that. So that's a really good suggestion for that. I think those are the only questions that we have right now. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to still put them in the chat box. I can always send those to Allison after the workshop is over and get anything emailed directly to you then for any answers that you might need. So for now, we're going to go ahead and take a break until about 1:05, and then we will have some staff from Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services there in Southeast Iowa do their presentation. So see you all soon. All right, Jamie, if you're there, go ahead and let me know, and I'll let you get started when you're ready.
Yes, I think, can everybody should see my screen now?
Yep, perfect. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm Jamie Claywell, and I've also got Patty here with me.
Hello.
There she is.
Yep. So I can go ahead and start. So I'm Patty Galvan Ramos. I'm a counselor at Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and I service the Wapello County area. And then I'll have Jamie introduce herself.
Yes. So I'm Jamie Claywell Herrera, and I'm a counselor for Vocational Rehabilitation Services. I work in the Keokuk, Davis, and Appanoose County. But between our offices, we serve 11 counties and in Southeast Iowa. So, and then there is vocational rehabilitation services in every county in Iowa. So no matter where you live, there is a counselor that is serving your area. We're just going to share a little bit about our services today and how you can get involved if you're interested.
one neat fact is that both Jamie and I are bilingual in Spanish. So if you know of anybody that would need our services in a different language, we'll be able to provide those directly. And if they speak a different language, we do have the ability to get interpreters to assist us throughout the whole process. So something to keep in mind when you're working with other people, or if you know of other families that may need our services.
Yeah, great point. Okay, so on this slide, we have the mission of Voc Rehab, and our mission is to work for and with individuals who have disabilities to achieve their employment, independence, and economic goals. So in other words, we help people get jobs in order to improve their lives. So there's a lot more to working than just the paycheck, but the paycheck certainly helps, but it also improves people's ability to live on their own, to be out in the community, and to be part of the community. So we provide individualized services to people with disabilities in order to help them reach their goals, and it is very individualized. I have never done the same two things with different clients. We're always looking at what their needs are, what their strengths are, and then trying to find a way to find a good match for them.
Can everybody see the PowerPoint? If not, maybe Jamie, if you want to make it a little bit bigger. And feel free, if you have any questions or anything, please put them in the chat and we'll answer those. Okay, we'll just give it a minute for it to load. There we go. That's way bigger than that. Okay.
Oh, it made me skip a slide though, I think. There we go, a couple slides. Okay.
So Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation is federally and state funded. And its main purpose, mission is to help individuals with disabilities find, retain, regain, and advance in employment. So even if you have employment and you're looking to advance in your job, that's an area that we could help you with. You're fine. Both Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation and Iowa Department of the Blind are voluntary programs. These are not entitlement. And everybody would have their rights and responsibilities participation. So individuals, if let's say they're in the process and they do not want our services, the person can decide that they could stop services at any time. So it's all voluntary. VRS works with a variety of community partners, agencies, businesses, and disability groups and other stakeholders. So we're very knowledgeable in our areas, and we know there's different resources that are available for people.
So our goal, as we said, people become employed, and we only look at what is considered competitive integrated employment. So the competitive part of that means it has to pay at least minimum wage, and it also has to be comparable to what other people who don't have disabilities would be making. So someone with disabilities could not go into a role where their counterparts are making $2 an hour more than them. It has to be comparable. And then integrated means it needs to be part of the community. This needs to be community-based employment. We're not looking at sheltered workshops or small work groups. We're looking at community employment that, you know, your typical community jobs that are listed. We work with people who have a wide range of disabilities. Again, no two people are going to look the same. We serve people that have physical, cognitive, emotional barriers to employment, and we have people that need quite a bit of support. They might need job coaches, someone to come in and train them on the job, be there with them to get extra training time. But we also might have people that need minimal services. They need that guidance to find the right employment. They might need an accommodation. The presentation about assistive technology was so great because I was thinking how much that ties into what we do, helping people find those little tricks, those little maybe low tech checklist on how they're able to get into their to complete their job in a good way, but a wide range of disabilities. So if you think you might be a good fit for VR, come in and check it out, because again, it's very individualized to what everyone needs. So we are a mix of state and federal funding. The federal share is 78.7% and the state share is 21.3%. Any presentation we do has to have this information in so that the public knows how we are funded, but the state puts in a certain amount and then the federal government puts in a certain amount, so we're able to meet our needs. There are 13 area offices and 24 service units across the state. So as I said, every county has someone that's covering it. Our office is based in Ottumwa, and then we have a service unit that is in Knoxville for this area.
Okay, and if you're interested in our services and you want to know what is it that we look at when we go through the eligibility determination, well, we will look at does the person have a disability? And sometimes a person suspects that they may have a disability but has never went into a doctor or been diagnosed, so we sometimes are able to assist with some of those assessments. So if you suspect that you have a disability, feel free to apply for our services. The disability must affect the person's ability to be employed. So if we look at 7 functional areas to see how the disability impacts your employment. What are some of the barriers? What are some of the are we missing anybody in the team effort? We try to approach it as a team. Like, for example, if you're currently receiving Social Security benefits, let's find out how we can bring the benefits planner and how that does that impact working impact your benefits, or it's not going to impact your benefits at all. So we looked at the different areas where work is impacted. The person must need VR services in order to work. You must be wanting to look for employment, maintain employment, or save your employment, or advance in employment. We're really focused and looking for work or obtaining work. A person can be referred to Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services via phone, email, in person, or we also have a referral form that you can complete. And Jamie will show the link in a little bit.
Maybe not. Maybe I don't have the on here because it went to the map. But on Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services website, there is a referral link, and maybe when I can stop sharing for a minute, I can look that up and we can share it at the end. But it's a very easy referral process. As long as we have contact information, date of birth, we can collect the rest if someone is interested in services. Okay, and this is our map. This shows the different service areas. So here in Southeast Iowa, this is our Ottumwa area. So those would be the counties that our office would help with. And then right over here, we have the Burlington office and the Iowa City office. So this is also available on the website, and you can go in and you can click on your area. Like if you're looking for somebody in Sioux City, you can click up there and get the contact information of who you could make the referral to. And you could always make a referral to us, and we could pass it on as well.
So what do some typical services include? And it looks like Jamie said, the services look different for every person just because we're individuals and everybody has different needs and have different abilities as well. So vocational counseling, this is where we start exploring what your interests are and then your strengths, learning more about your abilities, and your experience, your educational background, and finding out what is it that you want to do, like your career goal, and if those your skill set matches that, and if not, what type of training is needed. Let's discuss like what education are you going to need, what type of training would you need, or like an internship. Sometimes there's opportunities for internships for you to grow on that. Skill and academic training. These could vary depending on the career choice that we both agree on. For example, we just recently finished the Customer Service Academy, and so our participants were able to acquire a certificate on just customer service because we've noticed that a lot of positions, that's one of the areas that the employers require. And what better way to show that by getting the certificate and showing that you've gone through some type of training. Assistive technology.
Can I jump in for a second with that Customer Service Academy? That's actually a certification that's recognized by several employers in Iowa, including Hy-Vee and Wells Fargo, CVS. So I think this is a pretty big deal. And Patty's part of the team that has done this Customer Service Academy. So if once people go through that, they are given like a preference to be hired at these business, and they'll be able to get that interview and have a greater chance of getting that job. So I think that's a really exciting thing that Patty is working on.
Another aspect is assistive technology. Not depending on what supports you're looking for, we can help you explore that. There's a lot of suggestions sometimes, but not all suggestions work for that person. So we will definitely help you with that exploration process. It's kind of like one shoe size does not fit everybody. Like I can't remember how the quote goes, but it's something like that. For example, I have a job candidate that's starting his business, but his reading is not proficient, and so he has difficulty. We were able to get him some technology where he's able to have the computer read to him, or if he's out and about, there's an actual app where he would just take a picture of it and it'll just read what the document says. And this has been very, very helpful for him. Even when he's in his daily life, like when he's going to a restaurant and he can't read a menu, he's able to take a picture and it reads it out to him. And so that has been very helpful. Job placement, we make sure, one of the things that's really, really neat about a program is that we just don't focus on, a lot of programs focus on education and training, and then there's the completion, you graduate from that program. In our program, we actually follow with you for the next 90 days of employment to make sure that your supports are set, or if issues arise, that we're able to assist you there on resolution. Studies have shown that within those 90 days, there's a lot of issues that come up when you start employment. So we want to make sure that you have the support set up. And after those 90 days, you graduate our program. Specialized services, and this just depends on each individual and what that may look like. Tool and work equipment. So if in your career, for example, we want to make sure that you're pretty set once you start your employment. So if you, let's say you're offered a position as a CNA, but you don't have like the scrubs that they require, but there's a lot of clinics that require like a certain color or a certain type. Or if you're working in a manufacturing company and they ask for steel toe boots, we don't want you to be worried about how you're going to get that. So one of the things that we do is try to help you purchase those depending on your income, and there might be some participation, a percentage of your participation on it, but we wouldn't, that would help you not worry about purchasing the whole thing. Also, consultation to employers regarding accommodations. We have a lot of employers reaching out to us who they want to make sure that their employees are successful. They just don't know what would work for them. So they will reach out to us and consult and ask us, hey, I have an employee that's a rock star, but is having difficulty in this area. Are there any accommodations that we should consider for this person? And that's where we come in and we learn about your job, the person's job, and then make some recommendations and see if those work. And if not, we continue exploring what will work for that individual.
Great. I apologize for skipping slides. When I'm looking at the chat, for some reason it keeps skipping ahead. So I'm sorry. I'm probably making everybody dizzy when I do that. I just wanted to add a couple of things to this. So for our assistive technology, all of us know a little bit about assistive technology, but then we actually have someone in the office, Malia, who specializes in assistive technology. So if I'm working with somebody that I think needs some assistive technology, but I'm not quite sure the route to go, I can reach out to Malia, and together we can figure out a plan. And if it stumps Malia, then we have Bob Hendricks that covers the whole state. So, you know, another expert that we can reach out to. So a lot of different layers. You know, with my own clients, I do some basic assistive technology. I was recognizing several things in the presentation before. You know, I had somebody that kept being late to work. Like she kept oversleeping, and we'll come to find out she wasn't taking her medication because she was confused about when she was supposed to be taking which pills. Well, that was a really simple fix. We were able to purchase one of those pill boxes that told her, this is what you take Monday morning, this is what you take Monday night. I think it cost us $6, maybe not even that. And then someone helped her set up her medication, and then she was able to sleep normally and be able to get up and get there for work. So those assistive technology things do not need to be expensive, like the low tech examples from earlier. We also help a lot of people do checklists. I personally use checklists for my workday and my calendar. So we train our job candidates to do those things as well. Along with the training, we also have what's called an externship. So I wanted to give you guys an example of that. I have a young man that is interested in working in a farm type store, but was lacking some social skills and wasn't able to get hired on anywhere. So we were able to reach out to a local employer and offer an externship where this young man would go to work for 8 weeks, paid for by Voc Rehab, and learn some of these skills on the job. So an on-the-job training, basically. And those are really neat experiences because he wasn't quite qualified to do the job right now, and you're not really going to go to college to learn how to work in a retail store. So he was able to work in that store and gain some of those skills. And every week the employer gives him a report card. Hey, you're doing really great on this you're making some progress on, and hey, these are the things that you need to work on. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity for candidates as well, to get some of that weekly feedback so that they can improve, so they can be hired on in the future. I wanted to add a couple things. Oh, sorry. So why partner with IVRS? So we partner with a lot of different agencies, and Patty mentioned some of those before. Case management is a big one that we partner with. We like to be part of those teams where case management and, you know, CRP, Community Rehabilitation Partner, is at the table. We partner quite a bit with Iowa Workforce. So even if somebody comes in and is interested in working with Voc Rehab, but we determine that they're not eligible for services, we often refer them to Iowa Workforce Development. Get them hooked up with the services that will be a good fit. And the same way, like they refer quite a few people to us. So we can provide some of that insight into a person's disability and think about how it might affect employment, and try and come up with solutions, identify needs, set goals in order to be able to move the case forward. So it's just some of that, it's just an extra set of eyes that specializes in that disability and how it can affect employment. So I think it can be really beneficial.
Another aspect that area that we help work with is transition services, and these are for students. And like Jamie said, in our office, we have different subject matter experts, and she's actually our subject matter expert for transition services. So if I have any questions in regards to students or the education process or system, she would be able to answer those. So Iowa works with students ages 14 and up that have an IEP, 504, or documented disability. Some of the services that we provide to students are job exploration counseling, again, because a lot of students don't know what they want to do after they graduate, right? And that's okay. That's what we're here for, to help them explore and find out what is it that they like and don't like. So we want to make sure they have we offer like work-based learning experiences, because our interests tend to change as we get more experiences. So we are always reviewing this yearly. We also help with a work readiness training. So we want to make, we've heard from feedback from employers that some students have the training, the educational background, or the experience, but they don't have those soft skills. And we want to make sure we start early in having students practice those soft skills. The more they practice, the more proficient they will be, and they'll be ready for their workforce. We also provide counseling opportunities. So we talk about post-secondary education opportunities, whether it be going to a community college, going for a technical degree, or going to Job Corps to get a certification. We just, depending on what career goal they have, we try to give them that information so they can make a decision what educational pathway would be best for them. And we also let them know about how to acquire accommodations when they go in through education or the training process. And so a big part of it that we do is self-advocacy training, so that way students are not afraid to ask for help, whether it be connecting to different resources or services, but also taking lead, especially like in IEPs or 504 meetings. We want to make sure that the team knows what is working for them and what doesn't work for them, or what things they're interested in. Their voice has to be, it's a big part in that meeting. So we want to make sure that we give those opportunities to students. And sometimes when we initially start working with students, they're extremely shy, and so they don't say a lot during the beginning of the school year, but by the time they meet again towards the end, they're more vocal. And so our job is to try to give them those opportunities so they can continue practicing.
Thank you. So I see that we have a question in the chat, and I'm going to try really hard not to skip slides, but can you explain how the IVRS waiting list works, especially for students in transitions? Is one of the waiting lists closed? So this is a great question, and this is actually something I had forgotten that we should go over. So when we go through that eligibility process to determine if someone has a disability, if it can affect employment, and if they need voc rehab services, part of that is determining which level of need they're at. So we have 3 levels. The top one I'm going to say is most significantly disabled. So those would be people that have functional barriers in at least 3 areas, and they're going to need a lot of support. So that list does not have a wait list at all. So if somebody comes through that eligibility and they're found to be most significantly disabled, services start right away. That next category is significantly disabled. And those would be people that have 1 or 2 barriers in functional areas. And those, that wait list changes here and there. I think right now it's about a week long. It's a pretty short wait list. I had somebody put on it the other day, and I think in 5 days they were off the wait list. So it's pretty short. And then we have our others eligible category. And these would be people that have a barrier in one area, but they only need one service. There is only one thing that they need and nothing else. And so, and I'm trying to think, I can't think of an example of that off the top of my head, but if you only need one thing and there's only one barrier, you'd probably end up on that others eligible wait list. And that is pretty long. I believe it is looking about 6 years long at this point. It's significant. So we always have a conversation with people when they get on that list of, hey, what are the other resources that we can send you to work on in the meantime, because it will be a long time until you are able to get off that wait list. And those would be the same for our high school students. So there's not a difference there between high school students and adults on which waiting list they would go into. So if you have heard, that one of those waiting lists is closed, it's probably that others eligible one that is very, very long. It's not closed. We can continue to add people to that wait list. It's just going to be a very long wait. So that was a really good question.
Yep, and with students, it's a different, things have changed a lot. So students don't necessarily have to apply for services to receive intensive services. That's what we call it. We can actually provide pre-employment transition services. So all these services from job exploration, counseling, work-based learning experiences, work readiness training, counseling opportunities, and self-advocacy training, we can offer those because they would be considered potentially eligible. As we get to know more about this, learn more about the student, and if we see that the disability is significant and may impact their employment, we would then encourage them to apply for services. But don't feel like the students wouldn't necessarily be able to participate in our activities like the job readiness classes that we offer, our summer program. They would be able to participate in all those activities. We would just not have like an intensive services piece of it. So we encourage for students to make a contact with us first. As we get to know them, then we would make that recommendation. Hey, have you looked into applying for our services? And then we can help you through that process.
And going along with what Patty said, I'm going to pull up our pre-employment transition service form. So like she said, it's going to make me log in, I think. This would be for any student that has a 504, an IEP, or has a documented disability. So we send these to the schools, we send these out to parents in order to get parents' permission to work with students. So it just has on here their name, race, date of birth, their school name, graduation date, and then if they have that IEP, that 504 or other documentation. And then we ask for parents to mark which of the services that they are okay with their student receiving. And I say to everybody, I think let's just do all 5 for all students, because most high school students could benefit from these things. And so then the student signs off, the parent signs off, and then we sign off. And then that allows us to have them participate in those services. And while we're doing that is where we're trying to gain information to see if they do qualify for those more intensive services where we would follow them after high school graduation into employment. Patty mentioned our summer services, which I think are a really cool part of what we do. We've done summer camps the past several summers where we go out and we do tours and we bring in speakers and we do community service. So 2020, we had a lot of really neat things planned, and then we're bummed to find out we were going to have to do it virtually. But we kind of did a quick turnaround, and our virtual camp went really well. I was really excited about it. I was one that was very sad when I found out we couldn't do what we had planned, our normal camp. But we had, I would say, a group of like 10 to 12 students that participated pretty regularly, and we did those multiple times throughout the summer. And students were really excited about it, and students were lonely. It was a hard summer for a lot of people. So this was a chance for them to come in and talk with other students and talk with other adults that were interested in what's going on with their lives. And we were able to bring in speakers that were relevant to them. Like we had a student that wants to be a DJ, which is not a job I know anything about, but one of the other counselors has a DJ friend. So he came in and he talked to us about what it means to be a DJ. And I have to say, like, I learned so much in that because I didn't know how many hours, goes into that. We had another student that was interested in being a dietitian. So we were able to bring in a dietitian. Really, really neat. So even though I was disappointed about going virtual, I was probably wrong to be disappointed because I think it ended up being a really good summer for a lot of the students. So if you have a student in school that you think would benefit from services, you can reach out to the guidance counselor, reach out to the special education teacher. There's a counselor in every school in the state. And as long as they meet one of those 3 criteria, we'd be able to start those pre-employment transition services. Here are my referral forms. Okay, we will click on that so you can see that. So this does ask for quite a bit of information, normal demographic stuff, how to reach somebody. We do look, if there is a vision impairment, then we'll do a referral to the Iowa Department of Blind. And then of course we would like to know if they need an interpreter. As Patty said, we are able to use interpreters for different languages. We can, for people that are deaf or hard of hearing, we can provide interpreters for that as well. And Patty has actually received specialized training in that area for that population. So you go through, this is the application. We'd like to know who referred you, and then just send that into your local office and then someone will call and make an appointment. We did have another comment in the chat. So my daughter has a brain injury, is also a single parent, and the problem has always been having childcare paid for and balancing work with home responsibility. And yes, that is a challenging one, trying to figure out, if it makes sense to work financially. And that is one of the cases where we can also talk with one of our partners, like through Iowa Workforce, if there would be a program you'd be eligible for that could help pay for childcare as she's starting, or if DHS, if she might qualify for paid childcare through that. But yeah, I think that is a common problem, and I was actually listening to a podcast this morning about how COVID has made that much harder for women in the workplace because childcare has become a much bigger barrier. So, okay, so this is contact information for our supervisor, Kelly Hugo. So she runs that whole Atomo office. So any questions, you can always refer them to her or us. So there's our contact information. Those are both of our cell phones and email addresses. So we are pretty easy to get a hold of. And that's it. I'm back to slide 1. Okay.
Thank you,
going
lady.
through. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about your services. I had a question. So with COVID-19, how has that impacted your ability to, obviously you can't meet with clients, or maybe you can, I don't know. How does that impact your guys' services helping folks?
Good question. It's definitely been a change. So I'm working from home today. Patty is at home today. We are primarily virtual right now. If there is a need for us to meet in person, we're able to do that. But if we're able to do it virtually, that's how we're doing it right now. I was really interested earlier when you guys were doing the needs assessment and how many people had a computer and how many people had a smartphone, because it does seem to me like it's been a bit of a challenge to do Zoom meetings with a lot of my clients. It has mostly been phone calls for me, but I talked to somebody in Cedar Rapids yesterday who said everybody she works with does Zoom meetings. So I think it's different in different areas, and definitely the bigger towns seem to have more resources in that.
And like Jamie said, it just depends on the individual's needs as well. Like I have been able to meet in person with a couple of my job candidates. One, because ASL is the primary mode of communication, so we want to make sure that we utilize them. That he doesn't have access to a computer or well, he does have a smartphone, but does not have internet service, and so that's been a barrier. So we want to eliminate that, and we want to make sure we offer that opportunity. It just depends from individual to individual what resources they have available to them, and then if it requires some type of training, for example, they do have the internet, but they don't have the computer skill set, then we do like also the referrals to our partners to make sure that we get something started so they become more familiar with it. With COVID-19, we don't know when that's gonna end or when it's gonna normalize, so we wanna make sure we prepare our job candidates with the tools available.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely it's a big change for everyone, and trying to figure out what's best for each person has been a challenge, but hopefully you guys are able to meet with people and provide the services, and it sounds like you are. So that's awesome and very reassuring for anybody out there who's wondering how that might have affected anything. What is a typical length for someone to be working with VR? What would you say, from beginning to maybe getting employment, and how long would you say that typically is?
I don't have a good answer for that because it is so individualized. It really depends. You know, if we have a high school student that starts at 14 that's going to college, you know, we might be looking at 8 years where we're working with that student. That is probably not typical, but it's going to be individual for what everyone's needs are. You know, if we're looking at a college student, if it's a 2-year college, I would plan 3 years for them to be in our services. Typically, if I have someone coming to me that's not planning on going to school, not planning on doing any of these programs, I usually make a plan that lasts about a year. Let's give us a few months to figure out what you want to do, a few months to figure out what needs you are, and you know, that job search can take a while depending on your area as well. Patty, do you have something to add to that?
No, and it's really geared by that person, that the job candidate. It's not necessarily us. It will just be the job candidate. Sometimes things will go really smooth and they're like ready to get employment, but then something happens where it may be medication changed or something that was very significant, life-changing for them, and that puts them a little bit, not behind, I don't want to say, but just a step back. And then what we do is we regroup and keep on moving forward until the person adjusts. And it could just be, like I said, like change of medication. Our body reacts to medication differently, so we don't want to put them in a situation where they're having to adapt to the new medication in a new job. So we want to make sure we get that stabilized, make sure that they're ready, and they move forward. But it's really the person that's carrying up the process.
And then
I do try to tell people, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead, Jamie. You go right ahead.
I do try and tell people it doesn't happen overnight. We're not looking just for a job that we could find them tomorrow. We're looking at something that can be long-term and is specific to their needs. So if they need a job tomorrow, we're probably not the best place to start. But if they're looking for that long-term career, then it would be good for them to come to us.
Awesome. And then my other question was, so if someone does retain employment and they've been there for a month or two, what is typical for like a situation that might happen that might be an issue in that first 90-day period that you might help somebody out with?
That's another good question. So I had somebody that had started a job, it was going really well, and then we just do periodic check-ins to make sure things are going well. And the next time I did a periodic check-in with her, she's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm supposed to be working 20 hours and now they're scheduling me 40 hours and I'm getting nervous about my Social Security. So in her situation, I helped her talk to the employer. Other situations, I might just prep her on how to talk to her employer about that. But I felt like she needed that extra support, talking to the employer, explaining, hey, this is what's going on, between Social Security and mental health, like 20 hours was max for her. And the employer was fine with that. But that can be an overwhelming situation. And honestly, like when someone does a really good job, they often give them more hours. So it's the employer seeing it as a positive thing, and it was just a stressor for my job candidate. So that's an example just recently.
Yeah, and a good example of too, some people have, like with a brain injury, might have increased fatigue throughout the day. So, they may want to work 30 hours, but maybe just literally physically can't because of any sort of issues they might be having with that. So that's awesome to know how much you guys support people through the time, that not only to get employment, but, for those first few months to help with any sort of things that might come up, because it's just human nature that, things kind of might go a little bit differently in those first 3 months that you might think they might go. So it's nice to have that you guys are there to support them through that. I do have another question. So if someone, sorry, I was writing down so many questions while you guys were you're talking, and I wanted to be able to get through them all. So if someone was to retain employment and then, let's say they lost their job 6 months to a year later, would they be able to call you back and reconnect with services, or how might that look if someone has questions with that?
They could absolutely call us back. Now, depending on what their need is at that point, we might, and I've had this happen where someone lost their job, said, can you help me find another job? And we kind of walk through, like, do you need my help to find another job? Because now you have all these skills from last time around. And I'm thinking of one case where they were able to go out and find another job without support. They learned those skills the first time around. Now, if they're still needing support, yep, definitely they could come back, get services going again. That does happen. I mean, it's not unusual for that to, especially, I had someone that had a job and their store closed down, and it was no fault of their own. They just got laid off. And he needed that extra support to find another job. So he was able to come back with us. That's no problem. And I did see that we have a question in the chat. I was going to grab that real quick.
Yep,
too,
go ahead.
if that's okay. So the folks that are on that others eligible wait list, that really long one, that are not above high school age, are there any comparable services to the pre-ETs available? And unfortunately, the answer is no. So for adults that are on that wait list, we're not allowed to provide any services or move forward on that. But that is where we would try and set you up with a partner. So if you do know someone that's on that others eligible wait list and it's been a while, you can certainly reach out and let us know. And maybe circumstances have changed that you would no longer be on that other eligible wait list. There might be new barriers that we didn't know about a few years ago. So we could see if you would be able to be bumped up to that significantly disabled category and start services. Or if not, if there's a partner that might be able to help you while you're on that wait list.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that one. I had seen that and I was just going to do that. So I'm glad that you addressed that. It's a good question. I think that is all that we have for questions, unless you ladies have anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up.
No, feel free to reach out to either one of us if you have any questions. Just let us know. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate your overview of your services and just how supportive you guys are with helping people find employment and retain that employment. It's so crucial. So many people with brain injury either are working or need support or have a goal of working, and who just need some assistance with figuring all of that out. So we quite often, as NERFs, neuro resource facilitators, refer to you guys a lot. So thankful that you guys are there and for what you do. So thank you for being on today. I appreciate you guys sharing your information. But I'm Annie Randolph, and I am the Outreach and Resource Network Manager here for the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I've been with the organization now for over 6 years. I started out as a neuro resource facilitator, and now earlier this year, I changed into this role, and outreach certainly has changed in the past 7 months or so with COVID, but I'm still excited to be a part of this organization and doing this role. So I'm excited to talk with you today about our services and what we can offer. And if you guys have questions at all, please feel free to let me know. So one of the disclosures that I have to share during our presentations and the development of this presentation was supported by a contract from the Iowa Department of Public Health, Brain Injury Services Program, and the contents are sole responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent official views of IDPH. Also, the content of this presentation is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So please always seek out the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you may have heard in this presentation. So with that, I will go forward. I will provide an overview of some statistical information regarding brain injury, some about brain injury outcome and varieties and outcomes. And then I'll talk a little bit about Southeast Iowa resources and services. And then I will also be talking about our services and supports throughout the presentation. So many of you may know already that are on this call that are either an individual who has sustained a brain injury or a loved one or a caregiver of someone with a brain injury about the definitions, but I'm just going to go through those here for everyone that's on the call. So an acquired brain injury occurs at the cellular level after birth and can cause cognitive, physical, emotional, or behavioral impairments. So things like that, that would be considered an acquired brain injury would be a stroke, near drowning, aneurysms, brain tumors, and that's not all encompassing, but those are just some of the ones. It's also important to note that acquired brain injury, or an ABI as we call it, does not result from any neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, although those conditions certainly have an effect and an impact on the way that the brain functions. Traumatic brain injury is umbrellaed underneath acquired brain injury. It is a type of acquired brain injury, and it is all about the physics. So it is caused by an energy transfer or an acute event when an external force injures the brain, so such as a blow, jolt, fall, crash, things like that. We'll go into some more specifics about each of those definitions here in a moment, but acquired brain injury includes traumatic brain injury by definition. So some causes of non-traumatic, so those acquired brain injuries that we talked about before. So these are the non-traumatic ones: brain tumors, blood clots, strokes, seizures, toxic exposures, infections such as encephalitis or meningitis, any sort of lack of oxygen to the brain, or any sort of airway obstruction. Strangulation counts as that, cardiopulmonary arrest, carbon monoxide poisoning, or a near drowning, things like that. Examples of traumatic brain injury in Iowa, or TBI. The last statistics that we have were from the Iowa Department of Public Health in 2014. Falls is the leading cause of brain injury in Iowa and nationwide. In 2014, it was the reason for 66% of the traumatic brain injuries in Iowa, following by motor vehicle accidents, unknown reasons, assaults, and then strikes or blows to the head, which can include concussions or other mild traumatic brain injuries. It's interesting to note with the causes of brain injury. I think most people think of brain injury and they think of maybe motor vehicle accidents or being assaulted or a concussion, and may not think that falls would be the leading cause of a brain injury. And I think it's because, especially in Iowa, our winters can be very detrimental and can really lead to falls, especially in our elderly population. And anybody can fall. You can fall within your home, you can fall outside, you can fall, anywhere at any time. So it can affect anybody. So it is the leading cause of brain injury in Iowa and nationwide. So this is a video that I'm going to share that goes through what happens during a traumatic brain injury. So this is a good representation of, for example, what might happen if somebody was in a car crash and their head jolted forward and then backward, leading to bruising on the front and the back of their brain. So the frontal lobe there, which is right behind your eyes, a lot of times when someone, like for instance, if they are in a car accident, will jolt forward and then also jolt back. So that's called a coup contra coup injury there, like it was just describing. So our brains are floating around in our skull, which is actually pretty full of bony ridges. It can be very easy for the soft tissue of our brain to tear and shear neurons, and really damaging the tissue inside of the tissue of our brain. Our brain is really floating around in cerebral fluid. So this is kind of my PSA that nothing on the outside of our head, on the exterior of our skull or the exterior of our head, is going to stop anything from happening on the inside of our skull. So although helmets can certainly reduce maybe the impact or the force of a hit, certainly nothing can really stop what is happening on the inside of our skull. So some statistics are that around 2,500 individuals are hospitalized with a traumatic brain injury annually. And then 95,000 Iowans, actually that was in 2014, there's many more now, probably well over 100,000 Iowans are living with long-term disabilities as a result of their brain injury. Nationally acquired brain injury is the second leading cause of disability. And then emerging research is showing that over 70% of individuals diagnosed with both severe mental illness and substance abuse disorders have had at least one traumatic brain injury. So a lot of individuals who have had a brain injury will tell us when they're talking with us over the phone that they feel like their injury is very invisible, and they have to explain themselves a lot, which can be very exhausting because a lot of individuals with brain injury have a lot of more cognitive issues. So maybe issues with impulsivity or awareness, or maybe emotional behavioral issues that aren't so easily seen on the outside and may not even have any physical changes after their brain injury that you'd be able to see. But they do struggle with more of the cognitive side of things, and which can be very hard to explain and hard to deal with as well. So this is just a slide around some interesting information around the cost of brain injury. So when it comes to dollars and cents, the estimated economic cost of traumatic brain injury in 2010, which that seems forever ago now, including direct and indirect medical costs, is estimated to be approximately $76.5 billion. Additionally, the cost of fatal traumatic brain injuries and traumatic brain injuries requiring hospitalization, many of which are severe, account for approximately 90% of the total of traumatic brain injury and medical costs. So that's from the CDC, which I thought was very interesting to take away. This is one of my favorite slides of the brain that breaks down the different lobes of the brain. In the frontal lobe there, in the blue part, you can see that, well, first, when it comes to the brain, there's no lines in our brain like this that really says this is frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, whatever. But we do know from tests and research and things like that these are the areas of the brain that is primarily responsible for the things that are listed in that lobe of the brain. So frontal lobe has a lot of responsibilities for initiation, problem solving, judgment, inhibition of behavior, planning or anticipation of things or events, self-monitoring, motor planning and personality, emotions, awareness of abilities, awareness of someone's own limitations, ability to organize, highly responsible for your attention and concentration, mental flexibility, speaking, and that's not even an all-encompassing list. But our frontal lobe is the command center of our brain and is um, just as every other lobe in the brain, very important, but has a lot of important responsibilities and things that it does. And if someone has an issue with any damage in the frontal lobe of their brain, you can kind of start to see if that might affect their ability to stay employed, might affect their ability to keep their relationships the same as they were before. It might be hard for them to continue any sort of daily daily habits or daily cares for themselves, to be able to take care of those the same as they were before. So if someone has issues um, with initiation and problem solving, you can just start to think how that might affect their ability to stay employed and keep a job, and then retain a job going forward. So one of the things that we'll help folks with our neuro resource facilitation program is identifying these needs, figuring out, a plan to help support them through that, and connecting them to the resources that would be able to help them with that kind of thing. We also do provide just a lot of education around what brain injury is and examples of how someone might be able to put in some supports throughout their day to be able to be more independent. So the parietal lobe, the yellow part there, is primarily responsible for our sense of touch, differentiation between size, shape, and color, and our spatial and visual perception. So someone after a brain injury might have, if they've received damage in this area of the brain, might have that spatial visual issues, which would really, when it comes to an example of how that might impact their daily life, is it would considerably affect their ability to drive and be independent and be able to do things on their own. So we can help people with any sort of issues they might be having with that and talking through some solutions that might be able to be put in place. The occipital lobe is primarily responsible for vision, and then the temporal lobe is primarily responsible for memory, hearing, understanding language, and receiving language, and then also organization and sequencing. So sometimes after a brain injury, people will have issues with the organization and the sequencing part, kind of like Allison alluded to before. Let's say that they have an issue when they go to brush their teeth in the morning. They may know what to do, but maybe the order or the sequence of how to do it can kind of be difficult to do and to remember. So there can be low tech memory aids that you could put in place to help somebody with that, for instance. I don't know if Allison specifically went over it, but I think there was something mentioning, if someone needs help with organization or sequencing, maybe putting some pictures next to the mirror in their bathroom of step 1 is to grab the toothbrush. Step 2 is to put the toothpaste onto the toothbrush, and so on. And it has a picture for each step to help that person be as independent as possible. So those are just different lobes of the brain. I find that just to be a very helpful slide for a lot of people, just to understand the different parts of their brain, how it's affected, and how that might affect their daily life. So when we break down the variety of different impacts that somebody might have after their brain injury, they typically go into a physical, cognitive, or behavioral emotional category. And this is not all exhaustive, but this is just a list of some of the most common ones that we might see after a brain injury. Like Allison said earlier, each brain injury is different from the next, so it's really hard to guess what someone's symptoms after their brain injury might be. But we know that we can just meet them where they're at and help support them along the way, no matter what their needs might be. So some of the physical changes after a brain injury that somebody might experience, a lot of people experience headaches of some sort, dizziness, chronic pain, could experience seizures. decreased coordination or balance problems, any nerve damage, sensory limitations. So those are just some of the physical things that folks might be experiencing. And then cognitive, difficulty self-monitoring or with initiation. Very similar to the steps and the things that were listed in the frontal lobe responsibilities earlier. A lot of folks will have issues with paying attention, keeping on task, difficulty focusing on their thoughts, deficits in any sort of language use and visual perception. So we'll help folks with that, find some strategies to put in place. Then behavioral emotional, frustration, irritability, restlessness, anxiety, low self-esteem, or depression. I mean, after having a brain injury, many people remember what they were like before the brain injury, and then they struggle sometimes with what this new life is after their brain injury and trying to figure it all out, which can be very stressful, to say the least. So we do know that folks with brain injury can oftentimes suffer more mental health issues such as anxiety or depression. Also can experience any sort of emotional lability, such as mood swings, behavioral outbursts. So with that one, we do, that makes me think of one of the ways that we help as our neuro resource facilitation team is if, let's say that somebody was receiving some sort of inpatient services at a provider, and they were having some emotional outbursts or difficulty regulating their emotions. That's oftentimes when we will get a call from the provider themselves, the service provider, and we will intervene and try and give some support around what's happening. We have a licensed behavioral analyst on staff who is fantastic at figuring out how to support folks through those issues. Even if someone is in a provider setting, but they just have, issues regulating their emotions after a brain injury, which is quite common, we can definitely be supportive with any issues they might be having there. So oftentimes also people will have issues with disinhibition, difficulties with emotional control, or personality changes. So this is a slide about the intersection between brain injury and mental health and homelessness and substance abuse and children's behavioral health, as well as refugees. So we know that individuals with brain injury have a variety of life experiences, and we know that oftentimes they might be experiencing other conditions or circumstances as well. And so because we know of the intersection between those, we can help folks connect to services that might be applicable for those areas. So 34 to 49% of those with mental health conditions also have sustained a brain injury. 50% of refugees have a brain injury. Homeless individuals are 5 times more likely to sustain a brain injury. 2/3 of children under 3 years old who are physically abused have a traumatic brain injury. Strokes, which are acquired brain injury, are the 5th leading cause of disability in the United States. And 72% of individuals in dual treatment for substance abuse and severe mental illness have reported a traumatic brain injury. So we realize and respect the fact that brain injury is part of a multi-occurring conditions for some people, and we are here to help people with the issues that they might be dealing with as well on top of brain injury. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our services. So our Neuro Resource Facilitation Service is a free service that helps individuals in Iowa choose, get, and keep information, services, and supports to make informed choices and meet their goals. Like I said, our service is free, and we do cover every county in the state. So Allison, who spoke earlier, she covers a lot of the southeast region of Iowa, east to southeast regions. So if you were to call looking for some support, you would be connected to the neuro resource facilitator that covers your county, and then they would be able to kind of help you from there. And my next slide is about the information that we collect at intake and what the process kind of looks like once you've connected to our services. So if you're a professional on the phone, we can also help you as well. So if you have somebody who you're working with that has a brain injury and is in need of some support, and you're also trying to figure out some resources for brain injury that might be applicable to them, we can also help as well. So if we're on the phone with somebody with a brain injury or a caregiver, we will go through a variety of questions trying to get a better picture of the whole person so that we can figure out the kind of services, supports, things that we might be able to help them put in place to help them reach their goals of whatever that goal might be. So we'll collect information at intake around housing, what their housing situation is, what they want it to be, if they want it to be different. We'll collect information about their finances if they're willing. This is all voluntary, by the way. We don't make anybody give this information, but if we do ask them if they want to share any sort of financial information with us, so we can figure out what might be their options especially if they want to increase their finances, or if they need employment, things like that, so we can figure out what they might be eligible for. And then we do help a lot of folks access transportation. We know that in the rural parts of Iowa, transportation can be very limited. So that is typically something that we get a concern about, and we try our best to connect folks to whatever is available in their area. That is the good thing about our neuro resource facilitators, is that they cover a chunk of Iowa. They don't have to know all the resources in the whole state, but they do and are very skilled at knowing the resources in their area and have a lot of connections with the folks who are in these different fields, so that they can make any appropriate referrals that are needed, and also provide a soft handoff or a connection to that agency, and then we will support our clients along the way once they get set up with these services. We will also ask questions around what kind of insurance you have. A lot of times people have questions around insurance, especially what it will pay for. A lot of folks have questions around Iowa Medicaid, how to get onto it, what the benefits of it will be, and we help mitigate any issues that they might have along the way with any insurance providers. So I know in my time as a NERF, I did a lot of support with clients around insurance needs. We do ask questions around any sort of vocational goals they might have, or what their status is now. Are they currently employed? And if they have a goal to become employed, referring them to the proper services such as maybe VR, Jamie, and Patty that spoke earlier. A lot of folks will have questions around educational or secondary education resources. We help out quite a bit with kiddos that have a brain injury and are in school. We can help assist with setting up a 504 plan, or an individualized education plan, or an IEP. And a lot of times I know there were many times when I was a NERF that I would sit in on a phone call for an IEP meeting and just provide some basic brain injury information, and some ideas that might be able to be put in place to help that kiddo be as independent as possible and supported in the classroom. And then sometimes we do provide support for anybody who is going on any sort of secondary education. So questions they might have with that, support with maybe connecting to, if they need to like the disability office at the college, whatever they might need, or if maybe they need some transitional VR services to help them with that transition in their life. We help people a lot of times with service connection and getting people the information that they need to know what services are available in their area. Are they BI providers or brain injury providers? And then helping people navigate the different levels of care that there can be, for the different types of services that they might be in need of. So we can help people navigate that. We do that quite a bit. We will also, and I'll talk about this later, we'll also help people as they are discharging from a service to figure out if they're possibly going down a level in care, how to transition into that change as efficiently as possible and as supported as possible. Brain injury awareness just kind of means we can educate people about their brain injury if they have questions about brain injury or common symptoms, or a lot of times we're validating people and letting them know that memory, for instance, is a huge barrier for a lot of people after brain injury. It can be very frustrating to have a change in memory and the things that you're able to do throughout the day. So oftentimes we are just listening to folks talk about their brain injury symptoms, and then if we need to, we can share with them the information that we know about brain injury, and if we need to provide any sort of education on that. We also can provide assistance around any sort of legal needs. We ask folks, do you have any legal needs at this time? If, for instance, you are wanting to apply for Social Security disability and you're looking for some sort of representation to help you with that process, we can help you with that. We ask questions around social capital, and if you have goals pertaining to that after brain injury. Physical health, being that we know that individuals after brain injury have a high likelihood or can have a high likelihood of having any sort of substance abuse issues. We'll ask them about that if they're open to telling us. And then any sort of mental health needs that they might have as well. When it comes to mental health, in regards to brain injury services, if somebody also has a mental health condition that has been diagnosed or even undiagnosed, we can help folks navigate qualifying for services that may not accept brain injury as a diagnosis, but may accept mental health as a diagnosis. And we can help folks navigate that as well and understand what their options might be for that too. So just want to make sure I'm staying on time. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, we do help folks with their goals through our neuro resource facilitation program. So we collect all that information from that last slide, try to get as best of a picture about this person as they're willing to share with us, ask them what their goals are, what initiated their call to us, and what can we assist you with? What were you hoping to get out of calling our services, and how can we help you get to that point where you feel like you have met your goal, and we can kind of assist you from there. So we're very person-centered, and if a caregiver is calling us and letting us know that their child or their spouse has a brain injury, and they're really wanting them to work on employment, for example, we will work with them, but as long as it's what that person is wanting, we will stay on track with that person-centered focus and helping them with their goals going forward. So that is what our services are based on, is the goals of the individual person. Oftentimes, I should add that oftentimes we are helping people through this process of achieving their goals. We will stay in touch with people for up to 2 years, longer if necessary, or if they need our help. A lot of times we are helping people, some people we're helping in the beginning to establish some answers to their questions, like how do I get onto Medicaid? So we'll help them with that. We'll help them get onto, what I'll talk about later, like any sort of Medicaid community-based waiver programs, the brain injury waiver program. We can help them with that. Sometimes people are good at that point and they say, okay, I've got the answers to my questions, but a lot of times we're helping people after that connect to services and then help follow up with them down the line to see how they're doing with that, to help keep track of those goals and to make sure that we're getting to their end result that they told us they wanted. We also keep track of the progress on the goals that someone shared with us, so that each time we call them, which is typically once a month or every other month or every 3 months, depending how often we think we need to stay in touch with this person. So that is very personalized as well, but we will keep track of the progress on their goals so that we can help them get to their end result that they were wanting. A lot of times we're helping to mitigate any issues along the way. Oh, I see that we have a chat here. Hold on just a second. And since I can see it, I will go ahead and try and answer it. Okay. From Jenny, is frontal temporal dementia an exception? By that, I mean someone with this can get services from BIA-IA. I will say that if you don't know, I would call us anyway. And if it has to do with, I've gotten calls from people with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or dementia, whatever it might be, because if it's not considered an acquired brain injury, we can still help out with the resources that we have, because a lot of the resources that we do have are helpful for any sort of changes in someone's brain. And some of the suggestions that we have and the resources for things to put in place that might help someone be independent are helpful regardless of what the specific diagnosis is. So I would still encourage someone to call us even if they didn't know for sure if it qualified as an acquired brain injury. So I hope that's helpful. Let's see here. Whoops. Oh my gosh. Here we go. Okay, so we also serve as a go-to for any brain injury related questions or concerns. So that kind of fits in really well with that question. So our staff stays up on the latest information and trainings around brain injury, especially when it regards services in their area, so that they can be as helpful as possible when you guys have questions. Okay. So this is just an infographic on the return of investment that we have been able to see in the state of Iowa. The Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa and the Brain Injury Services Program has been able to avoid psych inpatient day costs, state prison day costs, county jail costs, state portion of Medicaid enrollment costs, and out-of-state placement for neurobehavioral services. And since 2008, we've been able to save over $20 million with that. So I would encourage anybody to reach out to us if they have any questions regarding any of our services. I hope that we could be helpful and be able to direct you in some sort of way that would be beneficial. Our nurses are always navigating complex systems, and so are our clients. So we are there to help you with a variety of needs. We know that someone who has just had their brain injury might have a lot of questions around the hospital services that they have, or the rehab, or exiting rehab and going home, and what does that look like, and what kind of services might I have to put in place, and who do I need to be speaking with. And we can help people at any point in time after their brain injury, whether it just happened or it happened 20, 30 years ago. We'll be able to hopefully answer some questions that you have and help you navigate some of the services and the systems that you might be finding yourself in now that you have a brain injury or a loved one of yours has a brain injury. So when it comes to funding for services, we also help out Iowans with this a lot. Like I said earlier, we help people with connecting to services. A lot of that has to do with funding and how you become eligible for funding. The three main ways to receive brain injury services funding in Iowa is private pay option, which usually isn't an option for most people. So we're helping them usually with other options. So MHDS stands for Mental Health and Disability Services, and we help people connect to that, which is on my next, I think it's my next slide. I will go into what that means. And then also the Medicaid brain injury waiver and other waiver programs if someone is eligible. The Medicaid brain injury waiver is one of 7 waivers provided by Iowa Medicaid, and it's to help people stay in their home and as independent as possible and bring the supports to them. So that is the idea with the brain injury waiver, and we oftentimes are helping people sign up for that waiver, and that waiver does have a wait list, as do many other waivers, but the brain injury waiver wait list the length of time that someone is typically on the wait list is between 2.5 and 3 years. So it's a very long wait. So oftentimes we are helping people figure out funding options in the meantime. So that leads me to my next slide, which is this is a snapshot of Southeast Iowa and the different MHDS or mental health and disability services that cover each county in this area. So our neuro resource facilitators, as you can see, we have, this is the map that's for our staff, but so we have the initials of each staff that cover that specific county. So Allison, who spoke earlier, she is AA there. So she covers all those counties that say AA in them. And then Lisa is the one that covers the dark gray there. And then my coworker, Allie Martin, covers the lime green areas there, kind of around Polk County, and then my coworker Courtney Sand covers the pink there. So no matter what county in Iowa that you live in, if you're looking for some ideas and thoughts around funding, first of all, funding for brain injury services is not widespread across the state, and some counties will fund specific brain injury services for specific brain injury diagnosis, and some will not. So we can help folks figure out if the other qualifying diagnoses for that county would be something that would be applicable to, your situation. Like I said earlier, the lime green is Allie, and that's the Central Iowa Community Services area. And you can always, if you're interested in finding out what each county covers, many county websites will have information pertaining to what they cover, how the process works on their websites. So you can always go to the website for any of these counties that you see here. So if you know that you live in Mahaska County, you can look at the South Central Behavioral Health website. So just for example. So I would encourage anybody that's on the call that has questions about what their county covers to check out their websites. If you have additional questions, please call us. We can help you navigate connecting to those services and any questions that you might have connecting to a staff person or whatnot. So these are just some Southeast Iowa resources that our staff that cover those Southeast Iowa areas gave me earlier today of the most common ones that they work with. So they'll help folks navigate a variety of different things. Hospital Center, so Great River Medical Center there, Community Action of Southeast Iowa or Southeast Iowa Link, Counseling Services, Milestones Area Agency on Aging, Alcohol and Drug Dependency Services of Southeast Iowa, Cross Mental Health Services, Hillcrest, Optime, and many more. So our NERFs are that's not even an all-encompassing list of all the places that they are able to help you navigate and connect to. So if you're on the call today and any of those sound familiar or places that you want to connect to and you have questions around brain injury and how to go about connecting to these services and getting some support and help with this, we would love to help you with this process, getting you connected, and our NERFs can help you with that. Other resources and services that we provide here at the Brain Injury Alliance, I mentioned it earlier, but we do help with the process of discharging, planning for discharge after a brain injury from any sort of level of care. We can do case consultations. So specifically for a provider on the phone today, if you have a client that you're serving that might need some support around brain injury and services and ideas to put in place to help them be more independent, please call us and we can do a case consultation and get some more information on that person's specific needs and help you going forward with providing services to them. We provide free online trainings, webinars, and workshops like these. We also have a program of ours called the Iowa Concussion Consortium, where we provide best practice information for Iowans serving and working with people that have sustained mild traumatic brain injuries, such as a concussion, and helping to support, especially kiddos in the classroom. We have a lot of advocacy accomplishments and wins there. So we're excited to be able to actually have tools for people in the classroom, professionals in the classroom, and people who aren't teachers but work with kids, on the field. We have resources for them to be able to help a kiddo stay safe and also go back to the classroom in a supported way. And we also have support groups, which I shared at the top of the workshop this morning. Please go to our website, and we have a listing of our support groups there. Like I said, our in-person support groups are not meeting right now because of COVID, but we do have some really well-attended online support groups that I would encourage you to check out, as well as our Facebook support groups. We also have an Iowa Brain Injury and Stroke Resource Network, where we work with providers around the state to encourage them to collaborate with us on brain injury cases and stay on top of the latest around brain injury and serving individuals with brain injury, and in the hopes of collaborating with them and working together. And we also provide advocacy in a variety of ways, but we also provide advocacy at the State House. So every year we have an annual day on the Hill. Usually that's in February or March. This year it'll be in January. So please stay tuned for some new things that might be happening this year virtually with our advocacy at the State House. So because we are short on time, and I want to give you guys a moment for questions if you have any, I'm going to go to our events page, and then we will wrap up. So our some of our events coming up are, we have a webinar coming up with Bridget Rudin, who is an author and inspirational speaker and also a traumatic brain injury survivor, entitled I Believe in the Power of Believing. It's a great webinar. She's already recorded it for us, and so I've already seen it, and it's great. It's very inspiring, and I would encourage anybody to watch that. So please feel free to attend that. It's free. Our statewide support groups, our Hill Day, and then our virtual, well, we usually have an in-person annual conference in March, but it'll be virtual this year, March 3rd through the 5th. So if you are a professional on the phone today listening in, we do have a call for presenters open until November 30th. So if you're interested in presenting at our conference with a topic that affects and impacts individuals in Iowa with brain injury, we would love to hear it. So please go to our website for that. Also, I guess I thought that was my last one, but it wasn't. I would encourage anybody who is on today to check out our website where you can share your story. If you are a caregiver or an individual with a brain injury, and you're interested in sharing your story with us, we would love you to do so. We use these stories at our conferences and our webinars, on our newsletters, and we share them widely on our social media. And we know that it helps people feel less alone when they know other people are going through similar things. So if you're interested in sharing your story, please check out our website, the stories section, and you can submit yours there. So there's our information if you want to call and get connected to a neuro resource facilitator, or there's our email as well. You can connect that way, or you can always go to our website and check out stuff there as well. We do have a ton of resources on our website for any information that you might need around a variety of different topics affecting life after brain injury. So with that, I will stop sharing my PowerPoint and go into some questions and see if we have anything here. Okay, so I see something from Tammy. Can you do a case consultation on a child case that has behaviors, but also has a brain injury, is on the waiver presently, but looking for placement? Definitely, we can totally help you out with that. Please give us a call or email or reach out. We'd be happy to help you with that specific question. We do a lot of work with kiddos in the schools. You're welcome. And like I said earlier, we do have a behavior analyst on staff who just loves talking about behaviors, where they stem from, what to do about them, how to support somebody through that. So please, yes, definitely give us a call. We would be happy to help you with that. If you have any other, oh, here we go. From Jenny, Social Security benefits. Help folks apply or help folks find a lawyer. Oh, yeah. I was trying to think through that. Yes, we can definitely help them apply, help them with that process, what that looks like. If they're in need of any sort of representation for doing all of that, we can help connect them to folks in Iowa that that are very knowledgeable with helping folks with disability be able to do that. So yes, definitely give us a call for that or email us as well. So thank you for that question.
Well, hello everyone. I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. My name is Megan Hartwig and I work with the Iowa Association of Community Providers. I am the Brain Injury Program Director for the association, and the association is a membership organization that's made up of over 130 home and community-based disability, brain injury, and behavioral health providers across the state of Iowa. We provide training and technical assistance as well as advocacy for home and community-based service providers. I personally have worked in the field since 2002, which is a really long time ago, it feels like, in a variety of roles. I've been a direct support professional. I've been a program manager. I was the brain injury program manager for the state of Iowa, and I have personal experience with multiple concussions personally, as well as I've had a couple of family members who have also sustained brain injury. I'm actually working on getting my master's degree in holistic health right now, and so that's why this topic is a really important one to me. So we're going to talk about ambiguous loss, and we'll talk about why we're talking about it throughout the presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about grief and the grief cycle, and how ambiguous loss is different from grief, or how it impacts grief. And then how do you know if you're experiencing ambiguous grief or loss? We'll talk a little bit about COVID, and I'm going to talk about some skills for resiliency and some things that you can do in your life to kind of help you through those times, or these times. So the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines ambiguous as something capable of being understood in two or more possible senses or ways. And so when we start to talk about ambiguous loss, it's the loss where an individual might be physically present, but psychologically absent, or they may be different in their personality or roles and relationships. So ambiguous loss isn't clear. It's not something that's clear cut and you feel it and you know what it is and it's over. It can be traumatic. So for example, when someone has a brain injury, that's something that's not expected. And whether it be from, a situation like a car crash or an accident or a stroke, those are things that we're not expecting. And so we may be in shock and our coping skills might be blocked during that time. Ambiguous loss is relationally based. So if you don't have a relationship with someone, you're probably not going to feel that grief around them. It's something that's it's triggered from the outside. So in this case, it's triggered by either the injury, the person's injury, or a change in the relationship with the person who's had the injury. And at the end of the day, it's confusing and it's messy, and that's why we're going to unpack it a little bit. So when we talk about ambiguous loss, there's actually two types. There's the physical absence with the psychological presence. And so an example of that would be when a person is deployed with the military. Often they're still in communication with their family, but they're not there physically doing things with their family day to day. Another example is my husband, not during COVID, but during his normal work life travels up to 75% of the time. And so we have a constant text message going. We're still engaged with each other, but he's not here in the house. So for example, when the tree lost its branch last week and fell on 30 feet on the ground and took the power line down, he wasn't home. and I was dealing with that myself, but I still had him there on the phone to be able to talk through things with. And so that's that physical absence. Then we have a physical presence with a psychological absence. And this is something that we see in both dementia and in brain injury. And so that person is with you, but they're either psychologically or emotionally not there, or the relationship is different than the way that it was. Another quick example of physical presence with a psychological absence is if you've ever seen people engaged on their cell phone and they're totally not paying any attention to the world around them. Sometimes they walk into things if they're walking with it. But that's another quick example of that physical presence but psychological absence. We're not able to engage with them. So when we start to look at brain injury and ambiguous grief and loss, this quote fits very well. So although TBI may result in physical impairment, the more problematic consequences involve the individual's cognition, emotional functioning, and behavior. And so we start to look at the brain behavior relationships to where the injury happened. And so for example, if someone has had a frontal lobe injury, we see changes in behavior and personality. The person's different than the way that they used to be, and sometimes in both behavior and sometimes in action. And so when we've got a frontal lobe injury, you may have someone that was, you may have a spouse that they were in charge of taking care of the checkbook, or they were in charge of taking care of the yard. So for example, at my house, I hate to say it, but I've never learned how to run a lawnmower. My parents wouldn't let me use one, and my husband takes care of that for me. And so if he was to not be able to do that anymore, that would be a big change in our relationship and a big change for me to get over. And so we do see those challenges with brain injury. And another thing that we see when we start to talk about personality and behavior with that frontal lobe injury is someone may have a very even keel personality, and now they have a really short fuse, or they're angry a lot more, or they're more emotional. Or another thing, they may have been very outgoing and now they're very withdrawn, and they may act differently in social situations with family and friends. When we start to talk about temporal lobe injuries, we see changes in memory and language. And so the person may actually forget events that have been important in life, like birthdays, anniversary dates, wedding dates. In addition to dates, they may not actually they may not have the memory of the event anymore. And there's certain events in the lives of families that are important. And so we can start to feel sadness when someone doesn't remember those things, or we're not able to talk about them in the same way that we were able to talk about them before. And with the temporal lobe injury as well, people may not be able to communicate as well as they could before, or they may communicate differently. And so that can change the dynamics of the relationship as well. So a lot of us, when we start out, we're young adults, 16, 15, 16, I guess they're still an adolescent then, but you're young adult, adolescent, and you have this picture in your mind of what your life is going to be like. You're going to go to college, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to have a career, you're going to travel, all of these things. And then all of a sudden, your loved one has a brain injury and all of that changes. And so there is a lot of grief around those changes. So a lot of us are probably familiar with the grief cycle. We're supposed to move through all of these stages, and then once these stages are done, we get to that place of acceptance and everything is okay and everything is all right. Well, more often than not, the grief cycle looks more like this. And so it is not a circle. It's not a path that you engage in and then you go through all the steps and then you're done with it. It's something that is continual. We move around in that grief. We may move from anger. We may start to have some acceptance around it, and then something happens and we're back at that angry again. And, it's important to note that it's kind of a spiral, and you just kind of keep spiraling out, going through the process again and again and again. And the other thing that's important to note is that everybody's experience with grief is different. And so, some people may move through the steps pretty easily, and they may only get sad not very often, and other people it's a little harder to get through. So I want to remind you to just be gentle with yourself, and that there's no wrong way or right way to grieve. So however you are grieving is okay. So ambiguous loss makes grief more complicated because you're not only grieving the loss of the person, you're also grieving the loss of several other things. And so you could be grieving the loss of your role in the relationship. You can grieve the loss of the person that's had the brain injury and the changes that they're experiencing, as well as the two of you that are in the relationship together and how that relationship has changed. A brain injury can really shake your sense of security as to what's happening in the future. There are a lot of unknowns. Um, and so, just recognizing that you might not feel as secure anymore, and you may question what the future will look like, and then that's normal. There's a loss of connectivity, and so that can be with the person that's had the brain injury, as well as with your community outside of you. Family and friends often don't know what to say. They don't want to do the wrong thing, and so sometimes they drift away when we really, really need them to stay engaged and stay in our lives. And I would say that the best thing to do in those situations is to continue to reach out and let people know what you need, and let them know, be very honest with what your needs are, and where you want to be with that relationship with them, because those outside relationships can provide a lot of support. There's also that loss of the future. So it could be that you planned to travel. It could be that you plan to have kids. It could be that you were going to move to this wonderful retirement home, and now you're not able to do those things. And so that's kind of that loss of future. And those are the pieces that make this kind of grief more complicated than if someone is just gone and you're going through the grieving process, because this person's still in your life. So acceptance and closure in the case of brain injury may become a myth, and it may not be attainable. And so I think it's important for us to remember that things aren't going to go back to the way that they were. But I also want you to remember that things can be good, and you can develop a new relationship with your loved one. And, if you approach the relationship with curiosity and with support and excitement, that things can be good again, very good, but just different than the way that they were. And it's okay to grieve the way that things were while still looking forward to the way things can be. So when we talk about ambiguous grief and loss, there's a lot of different things that can happen both emotionally and physically in our bodies. And so, we may feel hopeless. We may have intrusive and racing thoughts. We may have anxiety where we haven't had it before, or depression. We may be angry. We may have irritability, confusion. We may think about our loved one over and over and constantly, and what's going to happen in that relationship. Difficulty committing to decisions, so not knowing what to be able to say. And it's okay to tell people that, I need more time, or I just don't know what to do. What do you suggest? It's kind of one of those things. What do you want to have for dinner? And that conversation just happens all the time, every night, and it can be frustrating. You just want someone else to make the decision for you, and so it's okay to tell people that that are your support system. It's an inability to move forward with everyday tasks. So you may feel like you're stuck. You may feel like it's difficult to initiate things. You may feel like you want to start a project and you get all ready for it, and then you're not able to complete it, or you don't even know where to start with it. And it could be things that you've been excited about and interested in before. And so that can be a really good indicator that what you're feeling might be related to grief. You might not sleep. You could have a hard time accepting the new relationship with your family member, or your role in the relationship with them. Sometimes we see people sabotaging their relationships and pushing people away because they're not comfortable engaging with them, or they may not feel that it's safe or like they'll be accepted. And so they may start to sabotage those relationships to push people away to get out of it. And there's a sense of lack of closure. there's also physical manifestations of grief. And so we start to see things like digestive problems or energy loss. People's immune systems can be compromised and go down because of stress. And we start to see people get sick. You can feel nervous, you can have pain that's unexplainable. And when you go to the doctor to figure out what that is, there's no cause for it. And so that is common. You might sleep more than usual, or you might sleep less than usual. You can gain weight because you're eating more for comfort, or you're not exercising as much. But weight gain is something to be aware of too. Or you may not eat because you're stressed and you lose weight. And headaches and fatigue are also really common when we're talking about grief. So I just want to make a mention of COVID-19. So we're in a really interesting time right now with COVID-19. This is kind of something that the world hasn't seen before, in the fact that this is something that everybody in the world is going through together. And there's been some research done since COVID-19 has started that COVID-19 is also causing feelings of ambiguous loss and grief. People are feeling sad, they're not sure what they're feeling sad about, they're experiencing a lot of the symptoms that I showed you on the previous slide. And so I just want to say that this ambiguous grief and loss can be compounded by COVID-19. So during this time, really be gentle with yourself and know that you're not the only one that's going through it. This is a worldwide event. So when we're talking about, ambiguous grief and loss, everyone feels this. So you as a family member feel it. The person who's had the injury, their friends may feel it, or your friends may feel it for you. Professional caregivers can feel this, as well as the person with the brain injury. They're grieving their own past and their own life. And when I talk to people who've experienced brain injury, oftentimes they'll say, it's so different from any other disability, because they may remember who they were before and the life that they had before. And so they're also grieving that life that they had. And so sometimes things can come out sideways. We see anger, we see depression, and we see people not having good coping skills around this. And so it's just important to remember that grief does impact everyone who's involved, and that everyone goes through that process differently, and it looks different for everybody. So I'm going to stop here and just check to see if anyone has any questions. I don't see anything in the chat box, but if anyone, I think, are people able to unmute themselves and ask questions, Annie?
Yep, if folks want to go to your toolbar, if you have a question, you can certainly unmute yourself and ask a question for Megan if you have any.
Okay. Well, I do want to step back to the COVID-19 piece, because oftentimes, we don't know what this is going to look like on the other side of things. And that's similar to walking through the experience of brain injury with someone as well. But, there are things that you can do to kind of focus on the moment. I know that early on in COVID particularly, and sometimes still now, I kind of get stuck in this loop of fear and what's going to happen with the future. And so focusing on the things that I can focus on has been a good coping strategy for me. And so, some things that you can do in the moment, and these sound really, they may sound small, but they can have a big impact. Washing your hands, recognizing that you have the ability to keep a safe distance, that you can choose to wear a mask. You can choose who to interact with and how you interact with them. So for example, at our house, we've been seeing friends, but we've been seeing them outside on our deck. Now that the weather's getting colder again, we'll probably go to Zoom. We've determined kind of who's in our bubble, and, when we can see family and when we can't. And if one of us has to travel for work, either my husband or I, then we don't see people for 2 weeks afterwards. So we have choices, and we have some control over the situation. Taking things one moment at a time and trying not to get stuck too far out in the future is another way to walk through this. I know personally I had to stop looking at the numbers every day, because that was something that was stressful to me. I have no control over the numbers. I have control over washing my hands, wearing my mask, and choosing when and where I go out and who I interact with. So I have to focus on those things rather than the things I don't have control over. And these skills that we talk about, or that I'm going to talk about here with COVID, can also be used if you're feeling overwhelmed in the moment with caregiving. You know, ways to calm yourself down and to stay in the present moment. So mindfulness can help with this. And mindfulness doesn't have to be, I sit in meditation for 30 minutes. Mindfulness can be taking 5 conscious deep breaths and really feeling your body, feeling that breath in your body. It can be going outside and watching a tree or a plant or nature for 5 minutes. And if you can't get outside because the weather's cold, it can be looking out your window at that too. That's a great way to interact and to center and ground. Drinking a glass of water and focusing on how that feels. What does the water feel like in your mouth? Is it cold? Is it warm? What does it feel like going down your throat? Is it refreshing? So, taking the time to really focus on what you're doing and what it feels like and what that experience is to drink that glass of water can bring you back to yourself and can be very calming. There's another exercise that is engaging your 5 senses. And so it is looking at things like name 5 things you can see, or name 1 thing that you can see. Name something that you can feel that's around you in your where you're at that moment. Name something that you can hear, something that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. And so taste, it could just be thinking of something that you could taste, or it could be, drinking that glass of water. And so that can also bring us back to the present moment and pull us out of that anxiety or that sadness sometimes. And sometimes it's okay to just sit with your sadness too, and to give yourself permission to do that. Sometimes I will say, I just need a good cry. And to be able to give myself permission in the space to be able to do that is important. So with that grief, things can pop up when we least expect it. And so we may be going along and we may be feeling fine and doing fine. And then all of a sudden we come up on an anniversary. It could be the anniversary of someone's injury. It could be a wedding anniversary or a birthday. And we may not be thinking about that in our conscious, but our subconscious knows these things, and our subconscious is still aware that these anniversaries are coming up. And so if you start to feel some of those things on that previous slide, I will start to feel very aggravated and tense, and I get very grouchy with my spouse and with my family. And that's how I can tell sometimes that's a reminder for me to stop and to check in with myself and see if I really am mad about something, or if what I'm really feeling is grief, and then what I need to do with that. And then the other thing to be mindful of with grief that I want to say too is that it can happen during happy times too, when things are going well. It can happen at holidays. It can sneak up on you, and when you see something that reminds you of a memory or an experience that you've had with a person in the past, that it's okay, and that sometimes you get pulled back into that cycle, and it's okay to sit with your grief and be with it, and then find ways to let it go. So some ways to cope, I talked a little bit about those already with COVID, but being able to name what you're experiencing, and that's for me, when I'm feeling grouchy, to be able to say, is it that I'm really grouchy, or is it grief? So being able to name grief and to be able to give it that name can help us to work through it. Being aware of your emotions and what you're feeling, and really being in touch with them. It can hurt to be engaged with your emotions and to be aware with them. I know I'm pretty good at shoving things down. My mom is really good at shoving things down, and she will tell you everything is fine and it's not fine. And so just being aware of those emotions and knowing that they're okay, and letting them come. acknowledging grief and loss, being able to say, I do feel sad, or I am grieving this specific thing. Connecting with others that who you can relate with. So support groups are a great way to do this. And I know that the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has some wonderful caregiver support groups to engage with. Talking with someone you can trust. That can be a friend, that could be clergy, that could be a therapist, but finding that person that you do trust and being able to talk about what you're feeling, and just to be able to unload, not necessarily, letting them know that you're not looking for a response from them. You're not asking for advice. You just need to be able to let it all out. Journaling can be a great way to do that too. You don't have to, you don't have to have a certain format that you journal in. You don't have to write so many pages. It can just be writing how you're feeling in the moment. It can be words. It's just whatever it takes for you to be able to get feelings down on the page to get them out of your body. Scheduling time in the day to do something for yourself that doesn't involve the other person. Whether that be taking a walk, watching a favorite TV show, visiting with a friend, having lunch out, going grocery shopping. There's lots of ways, but giving yourself the permission and the space to be able to do that, finding ways to do that. Give yourself permission not to think about it. I know I get stuck sometimes in this space of guilt, and I feel like I should be focusing on this all the time. And is there something wrong with me if I'm not thinking about this all the time? Because this was a really big event that happened, this brain injury, and wow, how could I not think about this? It's okay not to. You don't have to let your loved one's injury rule your life. There are things that you absolutely have to be attentive to, but giving yourself permission not to think about it 24/7 can help you to get out of that cycle of grief and allow you a space to cope. Talking with a professional, so talking with a therapist or a psychologist. It's important to remember that the diagnosis isn't the person. So the person you love is still there, they're just different, and the relationship is different. And sometimes we get stuck on that diagnosis. And so knowing that your loved one is still there and they still do want to have a relationship with you is important. We live in a very black and white society. And so, there may have been ways that you did things before that were the way you did them. Give permission to yourself to find the gray, finding new ways to do things or new ways to interact with your loved one. And finding that gray space in between can be a wonderful way to help the relationship grow in new ways and to develop that new relationship with this person who's the same person but different. Avoiding the rabbit hole. I am horrible at this. I get on a topic and I research it as much as I can, and I think about it as much as I can, and I talk about it as much as I can because my brain is trying to make sense of it. And all I do is cause myself more anxiety and more confusion, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And so it's really important to kind of try to stay out of that rabbit hole. It's good to research. It's good to know information. It's good to ask questions. But when you find that whatever topic it is that you're researching is kind of taking over your life, try to pull back from it a little bit and have some balance and get out of that rabbit hole. Discovering new hope for the future. So look to the things that are going well in the relationship. Look for the things that are going well in your life. Be open to those changes and try and maintain kind of a playful attitude and develop, what do things look like going forward? We get a new page. What does this new page look like? How are we going to write it together? And so just reframing sometimes is an important thing. And celebrating what remains. So if someone does have, good long-term memory, celebrating those moments that you've had in the past together, or reminiscing about vacations that you took or happier times, and celebrating who the person is, because at their core, they're probably still the same person deep down. And so finding that and celebrating it and bringing it out in the person every day. The present doesn't override the past. You still have the wonderful times that you've had with your loved one. And so keeping that in mind, looking at family roles and, determining what is it that I need to be taking on, or what are some things that my loved one may be able to do that I've done in the past, like fold laundry, and letting go of some of the perfection around it. I know I'm very persnickety about how my towels are folded. But I've learned over years of marriage that if my husband folds the towels, not to criticize, and to just take them as they are and put them on a shelf and go with it, and let go of some of that perfection around it. And so reassessing the way that we approach situations. Be open to the new relationship that you have. Find meaning in the situation, and that can be through journaling and talking. For some people, it could be through spiritual direction with a spiritual director, but being able to untangle and to find the meaning in the situation. Moving your body is so important. Feelings get stuck inside, and it sounds strange, but feelings can actually get stuck energetically in our bodies. And so when you move your body, you can release that. Exercise builds in endorphins. It helps to keep us healthy, and it can just help move things through emotionally as well. Being outside and being in nature and fresh air, even if it's just for 5 minutes, if you're doing it in a mindful way, is a really great way to diffuse a situation and to be able to recognize that there's more out there than what you're feeling inside if you're feeling trapped. And then practicing mindfulness is another great way to take care of yourself. And that can be a meditation practice. It could be a centering prayer practice. It could be, a deep breathing practice, yoga, Tai Chi. There's lots of ways to practice mindfulness. I want to talk a little bit about, or just mention another kind of grief, and that's anticipatory grief. When we've had someone in our lives that's had a traumatic injury, it's not a uncommon jump to go to the place of what will happen when they're gone. And that can be with any member of your family or any friend. And I this is something that I've struggled with throughout my life. But just recognizing that anticipatory grief when it happens and trying not to stay there. Really trying to be in the moment and not try to worry too much about what's going to be coming. So staying in the moment as much as you can and not grieving things that haven't happened. My mother will tell you I'm really, really good at pre-suffering. And so this is something that I work on continually. So just being aware of when it's happening to myself and practicing some of those coping mechanisms to be able to let it go. And sometimes just crying is an okay thing too, for me, at least. Might not be for you, but for me, it's okay. I've heard of people that have, I have an instructor right now who has a room in her house that she put plywood up on the wall, and she goes to the Goodwill and she buys pieces of glass or pottery and she breaks them against the wall. It sounds, it's a great way for her to release stress. It's not something that everybody can do, but just finding those things that work for you. So there are a lot of really good resources out there, and some that are even available, during COVID. So the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa has great support groups and all kinds of information that's available. The Neuro Resource Facilitators are wonderful with working through issues with folks. And so I encourage you to engage with the staff at Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. They're all wonderful. Brainline.com is another great resource. They have lots of stories from families. You can search by topic. They have some forums. You can look at, comments that people have left on articles. They've got great videos. So it can be a great place to go, and that's something that's available 24/7. There's lots and lots of online yoga options. Yoga by Adrienne is one that I like a lot. She has a lot of YouTube videos. There's Tai Chi videos online. Violet Ling has many, many of them on YouTube and on Facebook. There are meditation apps that are free. You can pay for upgraded content, but I find that there's enough content in most of them for me. Insight.com or Insight Timer is one of the apps that I use. They have just a timer on the app, but they also have recorded meditations that you can listen to, and they're anywhere from 5 minutes to a couple of hours long. They have some great ones for sleep. That's when I use them a lot. So those are great. Religious groups are another place where people can find a lot of comfort. And one that's not on here that I wanted to mention too is checking in with your general practitioner and checking in with your own doctor and keeping up on your own health. You know, if things are feeling different for you, or you're having a really hard time dealing with things, you know, sometimes there are, you know, medications or supplements that can help with those. I know that particularly during COVID, I've had a really hard time sleeping, and so I take melatonin. That's something that's worked for me. But talking to your doctor about ways, you know, interventions for yourself is a great way to support yourself physically, you know, as you're dealing with some of the emotional pieces of grief. So I'm going to invite you into a practice with me today. This is a picture that I took of a bowl of stones that I keep on my desk. And sometimes I like to look at them, and sometimes, you know, it's comforting to have one to kind of hold on to. I have a tendency to collect nature type things, and they remind me to ground and to be centered. And there's things outside of myself. But I'm going to invite us into just a about 5 minute to 7 minute meditation practice. And so I invite you to where you're at, put your feet flat on the ground if you can, sit up nice and tall. And you can either close your eyes or gaze at your lap softly. And just take a couple of deep breaths in and feel the way the air comes into your nose and out. So start by settling into that comfortable position and allow your eyes to close or keep them open with a softened gaze. Begin by taking several long, slow, deep breaths, breathing in fully and exhaling fully. Breathe in through your nose and out through your nose or mouth. Allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. Bring your full attention to noticing each in-breath as it enters your nostrils, travels down to your lungs, causes your belly to expand. And then notice each out-breath as your belly contracts and air moves up through the lungs and back up through the nostrils or mouth. Invite your full attention to flow with your breath. Notice how the inhale is different from the exhale. You may experience the air as cool as it enters your nose and warm as you exhale. As you turn more deeply inward, begin to let go of noises around you. If you are distracted by sounds in the room, simply notice them and bring your intention back to your breath. Simply breathe as you breathe, not striving to change anything about your breath. Don't try to control your breath in any way. Observe and accept your experience in this moment without judgment. Paying attention to each inhale and exhale. If your mind wanders to thoughts, plans, or problems, simply notice your mind wandering. Watch the thought as it enters your awareness as neutrally as possible. Then practice letting go of the thought as if it were a leaf floating down a stream. In your mind, place each thought that arises on a leaf and watch as it floats out of sight down the stream. Then bring your attention back to your breath. Your breath is an anchor you can return to over and over again when you become distracted by thoughts. Notice when your mind has wandered. Observe the types of thoughts that hook or distract you. Noticing is the richest part of learning. With this knowledge, you can strengthen your ability to detach from thoughts and mindfully focus your awareness back on the qualities of your breath. Practice coming home to the breath with your full attention. Watching the gentle rise of your stomach on the in-breath and the relaxing, letting go on the out-breath. Allow yourself to be completely with your breath as it flows in and out. You might become distracted by pain or discomfort in the body, or twitching or itching sensations that draw your attention away from the breath. You may also notice feelings arising, perhaps sadness or happiness, frustration or contentment. Acknowledge whatever comes up, including thoughts or stories about your experience. Simply notice where your mind went without judging it, pushing it away, clinging to it, or wishing it were different, and simply refocus your mind and guide your attention back to your breath. Breathe in and breathe out. Follow the air all the way in and all the way out. Mindfully be present moment by moment with your breath. If your mind wanders away from your breath, just notice without judging it, be it a thought, emotion, or sensation that hooks your attention, and gently guide your awareness back to your breathing. As this practice comes to an end, slowly allow your attention to expand and notice your entire body, and then beyond your body to the room you're in. When you're ready, open your eyes and come back fully alert and awake. Your breath is always with you as a refocusing tool to bring you back to the present moment. You can set your intention to use this practice of breathing throughout your day to help cultivate and strengthen relaxation and attention. And so on that note, I just want to remind everyone, this is something that I've seen online in multiple places, and I have not been able to find out who said it originally, but treat yourself the way you would treat a small child. Feed yourself healthy food and make sure you spend time outside. Put yourself to bed early. Let yourself take naps. Don't say mean things to yourself, and don't put yourself in danger. And so remember that grief is a real thing, and particularly, when we're walking the walk of brain injury with a family member or friend. It can be really easy to get overwhelmed. And so just to keep remembering to care for yourself and to find those ways that you can be supportive of yourself, because you are the most important thing. And if you're not healthy and well and whole, you can't pour from an empty cup. And so, really taking the time to acknowledge if you're feeling any of these things, getting help if you need to, knowing that you're not alone and that it's something that everyone will experience at some point in their life, and just really being gentle with yourself and knowing that you're doing a good job, even when it doesn't feel like it. So, thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you today. I wish you the best. And if you do have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to me. Annie has my contact information, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was awesome. I really appreciate your time and just the knowledge that you shared. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very
Um,
welcome.
one of the takeaways from myself, and folks, while I'm talking, feel free to put in some questions or thoughts. One of my takeaways was when you said, give yourself permission to find the gray, in between the black and the white. I just love that. I'm gonna be thinking about that the rest of the day. Thinking about what that means in my life, and what that means for people that we work with. And that was I want to be pondering on that one for a while. Also, one of my other takeaways was that it's okay to sit with your sadness. I love that. I feel like oftentimes we're programmed to do whatever we can to get rid of our sadness and to distract from it. And trying to remind myself of that when I'm feeling that way, that it's okay to feel that way. So I hope everybody else grabs hold of that message as well. I think that is just so important. And it's okay to not be okay and to move through that process. So thank you for that.
There's no timeline. Yeah, you're welcome.
One of my questions that I did have was what would you say is the reason why it's so important to understand ambiguous loss?
I think it's important to understand because we can get caught in that cycle of blaming ourselves and thinking that either we're the only person that feels this way or we shouldn't be feeling this way, and not understanding that it is common. And so that would be my recommendation to people, and why I think it's important for people to know about it and know what it is just that sense that it is normal. Everybody feels it. It's a part of the process. It's not a comfortable part of the process, but knowing that when things are coming out sideways, or you may be snippy or grouchy at someone, or you respond to them in a way that you wouldn't normally, that can be grief, and that can be that ambiguous grief. We don't always name it as grief, but that is when we stop to think about it, that's kind of the underlying sense and the feeling that's going on for us and in our bodies. And so just knowing that it's normal, it's normal, it's normal, it's normal. It's okay.
Well, and I love
to care for yourself.
The meditation part where you had said you might be feeling some feelings coming out during this time. I think that just that practice itself is so helpful for people to take the time to really think through their thoughts and what they're feeling, and giving themselves that time. That could be where they're finding their understanding of why they're feeling a certain way is through that time that they've dedicated for themselves. So what a great technique, and thank you for sharing that with everybody. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if you guys have questions that
I'm curious if people would be willing to put in, their takeaways, because I think it's interesting in the chat box, because I think it's interesting to know what other people are taking away, and it may, as you see what other people put into the chat, it can kind of also jog some things for you as well. So if you don't mind, um, feel free to put those in the chat. Sorry to jump in there.
No, that's such a good idea. If anybody has anything to add, comments, thoughts, whatever, please feel free to add those in. I think that was just such an awesome way to end the workshop, and thank you for providing the time. If anybody has any other questions that they have, feel free to email those to me for any presenter, and I can forward those on to the presenters and get back with you guys. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.